Anybody can have short hair.
Yes, anyone can have short hair.
I love how the private ground school is like adults.
Yeah. That is strange.
Mir, how old are you?
23.
Kanan, how old are you?
21.
That's it. You were the
Yeah.
eldest.
Ancient.
Well, I'm
23 years here,
I
actually, so.
said you were the eldest of the States. Aside from Bill.
Eldest. Unless you said
It's not from
eldest.
Bill.
Wait, am I older than you?
Yeah, we're all older than her.
Excuse me.
It's crazy.
Everybody.
No, I'm 21.
She's younger 21 than me.
Nicole, aside from
Callie's
Bill,
at
I think
least
I'm probably the only one.
Isn't it weird?
At least 7.
Except for Bill, I think I'm probably the only one in here who's married.
You don't know that.
I'd be a lot more put off by this, but I work with a bunch of high schoolers every couple of months for their shows. So I'm used to being around a bunch of,
Yeah.
I'm gonna not say the words that I want to say, but a bunch of teenagers.
Just remember that we're broadcasting too.
Oh!
All rumors are being recorded.
Whoopsie.
You're recording live now?
Yeah. I always hit it a couple minutes early, so that
Everything I say is a joke and it should not be
It's your
considered
boy.
to be my serious thoughts. Just putting that out there for the record.
Oh, Virgil,
Should I sit next to this guy, or is he causing trouble?
that's your call.
Sit over here.
Yeah, you might want to pick somewhere else. The auditorium lights were very, very hot today. Someone forgot to turn off the fan in the control booth. Or sorry, forgot to turn on the fan in the control booth. They're not supposed to turn on in the first place.
It's 5 o'clock. If we don't start on time, we won't end on time. Like we're going to end on time anyway. So, all right, week 4. We're going to need a piece of
I got his paper this time.
paper. You notice it's just a blank piece of paper.
And it's not out.
That means I can do all that, right?
Not only can you, you are expected to.
I'm gonna myself draw that.
Is it acceptable to doodle in my notebook instead?
No, because you're going to hand it back to me.
Oh boy.
It's like all I ever do in this.
I don't know how to draw.
All right. So, as always, we're going to start off with. Everybody's just leaving?
I don't have a writing pencil.
Why did you come to class without a writing?
Nice try. That's great.
I'm going to have to do like safety statements and work hazards. All right. Kind of waiting for Callie to come back.
It's already here.
Okay. So, as always, we start off with corrections and clarifications. And I don't really think I have a clarification for this class. I have one for tomorrow night's class, I got to tell you. So what I do have instead is clarifications of test trips. And part of the little process you're going to do tonight is part of this. Develop and memorize a cheat sheet for the test. Just a mnemonic aid that you do over and over again. And when you walk into the written test, sit down and draw your cheat sheet. And I say draw it because I think most of what we're going to do, most of the things that will really help you are more of a sketch. But there's also like any of the little acronyms that we use to remember something. If you sit down right at the beginning, and you have done this like every week for the next 12 weeks, when you sit down, you'll be able to just write it out. And then when you're stressing in a question, it lets you pause and it gives you something to look at and gain your bearing. Okay? So that's the first one. So immediately sit down and design your sheet as you're going. If I've had you do something like 8 times, that's probably a good indicator that should be on your sheet. But then immediately recreate that. And then know what is in, and I have a spelling error. Look, see? Know what is in the Airman Knowledge Test Supplement. So I'm putting it on the Google Classroom tonight. Is my plan, probably tomorrow at the rate I'm going. But the test supplement is a publicly available free document. You can just get it as a PDF. But you want to scroll through it. Because if you look, like this is on page 11 of the test document. It shows you what a Vortac, a VOR, DME, a TACAM look like. It shows you these little ones here are the sketches of the different approach lighting systems, and it tells you what they are. And if you get a question about ALS, and you're like, oh my God, I don't remember what that is. I don't remember which one's the long one. I don't, you're not supposed to memorize these things anyway. It's in the book they give you. The problem is, if you haven't gone through that book and at least have some idea where it is, it'll take you too long to find it. But, I gotta go look because it changed the time. You get 2.5 hours for the instrument. Is that correct? So 2.5 hours to go through and answer 65 questions. 60 count, 5 don't. You don't know which 5 don't count. That's how they test the questions to see if they're valid questions. In theory. My whole point here is in helping you in ground school, I told you my number one goal here is getting you through the written test, then it's getting you through the orals, and then it's helping you to prep for your flight training. So that's what ground school's for. These are test taking techniques that will save you an amazing amount of stress. And it will get you a better score, and it will make your orals easier. Because you get a better score. So, alright, so review questions. We gotta do review questions every night. First one, just draw our standard 6-pack plus 2 that we've been using.
On this paper?
Yep. I think I only have to do, I have to go with it down and then I go with that one by myself. So you should at least have something that looks roughly like what I got up there right now. Those of you that have already started labeling, that is coming. So the second step is labeling what all the, no, you can keep up, working ahead on this is perfectly fine. The idea is, can you draw it? Can you label the instruments? All right, and then can you do the Rod Machado steps? And then finally, can you put what the unit of measure is, that because not every one of them has a unit of measure, but what the unit of measure is that you get from that device. You're just not going to let it do it?
That's really nice.
Going to make it 3D?
Your plane is here, right?
Yep.
In number 2. Yep. They called me the other day. There was a plane in there. Good. That's the thing.
So, and it is perfectly valid to tweak this if you like something a little bit different or, you whatever. But, so the drawing I have, you have your ASI, so you have your airspeed indicator, your attitude indicator, your altimeter across the top, then you've got your turn coordinator, your directional gyro, your vertical speed indicator. You've got your, now I put CDI, and I will tell you something as I was prepping for tonight, a little nuanced clarification. Technically, that entire object is called an Omni display, or it's called a navigational head. The CDI is specifically the needle that swings left to right or that moves left to right. It shows your course deviation indicator. A great many people in this world refer to the entire thing as a CDI. And we'll talk about nuance and precision of language as we go through. But so, and then I've got my tachometer and my compass. So, also people call it the Omni bearing selector. Hence the Omni. All right. So the Rod Machado labels. Now I always do start, level, straight. Rate and turn are easy. And then that ASI is technically power for speed, climb, and descend. I just use climb and descend as reminders because it's too long to write all that out. But so, kind of in the back of your mind, maybe right under there, power for speed, climb, and descend. Get that ingrained. And then the tack is your regular power. All right. Next one. So, your speed is in knots or miles per hour. Turn rate is in degrees per second. Now, it only indicates actually one specific turn rate. And what is that turn rate?
Standard rate.
Which is?
Minute for half turn.
Minute for half turn. Actually, what's labeled on it? Do I know?
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minute turn, because it's 2 minutes for a 360 degree turn, which comes out to how many degrees per second?
3.
Math.
Exactly, 3. Memorize those up. 3 degrees per second, 1 minute for 180 degrees, and it's 2 minutes for a full 360. You really need to be ingrained in your heads. All right, the straight, it only measures in degrees. That's the unit of measurement. Feet per minute. Altitude's always in feet, and your tack is in RPM. And if you have a manifold pressure gauge, it's going to read in inches of mercury. All right. I guess I could have labeled compass, it reads in degrees too. All right. Oh, why are you continuing on? All right. So before I move on, with your little study aid in front of you, there are 3 general groupings of instruments in the primary supporting method. What are the 3 groupings? Write it on your page. And leave space because you're going to put the instruments in there. Andrew, what are the 3?
Pitch, bank, and power.
Pitch, bank, and power. And do we want to know them in that order?
Yes.
Why?
Because pitch is most important, bank is second most important, power is least important.
Yeah, well, generally, with the airplanes we're flying, it's not that power is least important, so we don't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
You're gonna
Full power.
the power that works is the power that works. All right. So what are, and I'm going to help you with this, the 4 pitch instruments? Don't tell me. Write them down. Then you can guess that the bank and the power instruments are coming next.
Yeah.
So, Mayor, what are the pitch instruments?
Pitch instruments are the attitude indicator, altimeter, vertical speed indicator, and airspeed indicator.
Okay. Do we have anything else? Anything different? That's good, because Mayor's right.
Okay, thank
There you go. That stress you a little bit?
Well, been a long week.
All right. Tristan, how about the bank instruments?
Turn coordinator, directional gyro, attitude indicator, and magnetic compass.
Anybody disagree? Alright.
I didn't get magnetic, but now I got it.
But magnetic compass. Okay, no. The reason we do this. And then, what are the power instruments? Josh.
TAC and airspeed indicator. And I think there's a third one, but I'm not sure.
There is, but it's almost a trim.
Manifold pressure.
Manifold pressure gauge. So, and your manifold pressure gauge and your tachometer go together. But it's still 443.
And that'll be on the test, probably. It might give the opposite of manifold pressure.
Yeah, you need to know, because the way they ask multiple choice questions, it'll screw you up. But the FAA says that there are 4 pitch instruments, there are 4 bank instruments, and there are 3 power instruments. That's their answer. I'm not wrong. So, I will tell you that for finding the pitch instruments, I always just draw an L from the ASI through the AI through the altimeter and down to the VSI. Those are your pitch instruments. They're super important. They're what they're supposed to be. It works for me. May not work for you. And then for somebody, the bank instruments, you just turn coordinator, directional gyro, AI, and over to compass. Connect the dots. And then power, it's the ASI, and then the 2 power instruments that sit over the other side. I have you go through this because I am firmly convinced that if you can draw this out before you sit down and are all stressed out, and you're just doing something that's kind of almost muscle memory, you can solve problems you could not solve otherwise. Also, if you sit down to draw this out and something happens and you don't really like it, I'm pretty sure there's a diagram that's dang close to this inside the test guide. I just forgot the name of it.
The test
The supplemental. So maybe find out if you can find where that one is in the book so that you can always go look at it and kind of cruise through. All right. We have any questions about the review so far? All right. Pilots should take care when retrieving charts or dropped objects in the cockpit to avoid what? Multiple choice there.
Is it A? I'm gonna say B.
Okay, I got to vote for A. I got to vote for B.
So we're gonna have to memorize these different.
So nobody
things for the
feels
test.
I guess so.
This is a question that is on the test.
Oh, okay.
B.
I got a B. I got an A, a B. I got 1 C.
I think the leans is when you make an extended turn and then you come back to level and you think you're still turning.
Or you think you're turning the opposite direction.
Sorry, it's opposite, yes.
Okay, so it's not the leans.
So
And what is autokinesis?
it's where a light appears to move.
A stationary light appears to move
Oh,
because
okay.
you're staring at it.
So C. Yeah. So you were right.
Of course he was right.
I'm gonna capitalize on that.
That's actually because that's a proper noun. I copied this letter for letter from something else. So, but that process that Virgil just went through. Do I know what autokinesis is? If I know what autokinesis is, I know it's not this. I can draw a line through that one, and now at least I'm at a 50-50 coin flip. You know, part of this is test taking technique, but also I'm telling you, you need to know what those 3 things are, because there's a whole variety of questions that revolve around, and they have another question that the right answer is the leads. You know, there's another question that the right answer is autokinesis. We covered this crap last week, so coming back to it. All right. Without visual aid, a pilot often interprets centrifugal force as a sensation of... What was that?
C.
Anybody think it's something other than C?
A.
So, I'll tell you, the first time I did this, I actually picked A, as I was blowing through them. It is C. The answer they were looking for is C. Also remember, though, that centrifugal force feels like gravity to you. So it's up and down. It's not left to right. So this goes back to, as you're studying for these things, think through. When you get the questions wrong in the study guide, go back and read through it. And if you, I'm really hoping that like next week when you guys show up, you're gonna be like, okay, I was doing practice tests and I don't understand this question. I got it wrong. I read the explanation, but I don't understand it. Because then I'm gonna have Virtual explain to you why it's wrong.
I'm gonna bring a few then.
There you go. All right, but so yes, so C, rising or falling. All right. If you experience tunnel vision and cyanosis, you may have symptoms of.
What's cyanosis? Yeah, I was going to say the same.
So cyanosis is when your skin turns blue. Usually it starts in your fingernail beds and your toenail beds. It's due to a lack of oxygen in your system.
Okay, well then that's going to be.
Well, there are two
So
things that could be a lack of oxygen.
there are actually three different things that.
Hyperventilation wouldn't quite be a lack of oxygen.
There you so
Too much.
there you go. Logic it out. So hyperventilation. What is hyperventilation, Nicole?
Coming in, right?
I almost called you Noelle. I don't know why. You and Lucas can go hang out.
So hyperventilation is where you're breathing very, very quickly and you're losing your carbon dioxide.
So you actually don't have a shortage of O2. So that helps you with this one. Because you know that it's probably not hyperventilation. All right. Does anybody know what happens to you when you get carbon monoxide poisoning other than you pass out and die?
You start kind of sleepy.
You start feeling sleepy.
Headache.
Headache.
Nausea.
Nausea is part of it. But there is a telltale sign of carbon monoxide that it wasn't even in the class. You turn bright red. So is that blue?
No.
Bright red. And now you'll remember it because I specifically stood here and said it. What happens is the carbon monoxide bonds with your hemoglobin, and its effect is to turn your skin red. And the carbon monoxide will not release from your hemoglobin, so you just get redder and redder. And then you pass out and die.
Nice.
So, okay. So, hypoxia. All right. I don't have it on today. I don't think I put a question on here today. 100% guarantee you should know the 4 types of hypoxia. All right. So, when I tell you it's not on for today, maybe you should study it for next week. Sensation, the sensations which lead to spatial disorientation during instrument flight conditions. Can you guys read that from there? They got a little smaller than I meant for too. I can barely read it from back here, but I can get it. Thanks. I see you got your glasses. Okay, I have another test-taking tip for you. It doesn't actually work on this question, but if you are ever just absolutely stuck, statistically speaking, the longest answer is usually the correct answer. It is a test development flaw, but the FAA does it all the time. They'll give you it's because when you write a test question, you always write the question and the right answer, and then you have to make up what are called distractors. Well, nobody puts as much effort into the distractors as the correct answer. So, all right.
This one's got to be A, right?
It's gotta
Oh,
be
wait,
A.
it's C.
I think it's B.
C is definitely not C.
Yeah, so that's the longest one, though, but I'm still sticking with
Yeah, I told you it doesn't work on this one.
Okay.
All right.
It is A.
I think
So I got, how many A's do I have? I got 2 A's at least.
Yes.
How many B's? Okay, I got 4 B's, 5 latecomer to the party, C's. All right, now if I tell you that the number one thing they want you to understand is to always trust your instruments, which one's the right answer?
B.
So B, must be suppressed and complete reliance placed on the indications of the flight instrument. There are a whole collection of questions that you always want to keep in the back of your mind. The FAA wants you to understand the only way to fly in instrument conditions is to 100% trust your instruments, except when you don't.
Except when they are arguing with each other.
Which is why it's cross-check and interpretation. All right. So, but what they put in a negative term. What they want you to understand is that you cannot reliably trust your own senses. Because your own senses have many, many, many things that will lie to you. All right, which system is most likely responsible for making you suffer from spatial disorientation?
I'm going to biology here. That's gotta be C, right?
I love A.
Okay.
What's the autokinesis system?
It's the one that drives your car.
It's a bullshit made-up thing that does not exist because autokinesis is the movie.
C.
Yeah, so
It's gotta be C.
it's gotta be C. You know it's not your cardiovascular system. So what is the vestibular system?
It's the stuff in your ears, right?
Exactly. Now, as pilots, that is one that you should just know. You should know what the vestibular system is because, flying with a head cold screws up your vestibular system and it causes blockage, which is painful. So between being in pain and not having good balance, it's a bad day. All right. What is the primary pitch instrument during a stabilized climbing left turn at cruise climb airspeed?
Cruise climb.
Yeah, what is the primary pitch instrument during a stabilized climbing left turn at cruise climb airspeed?
Our cruise climb.
It's at cruise climb.
What do you think it is?
Airspeed.
indicator.
You think it's your attitude indicator?
It's got to be airspeed because it says.
That's what I was supposed to cruise climb. Yeah.
Power for speed. If you are flying a specific speed, your vertical indication, and I'm double checking. I actually have this one written in here so I don't screw it up. C, airspeed indicator. All right. When is the attitude indicator primary for pitch?
45-degree turn.
That is true. It's steep turn, but that's okay. But that's bank. Primary for pitch.
Is
Vertical. You have an answer.
When you're entering or climb or you're starting a climb or starting a descent.
Yeah. Instead of the word start, you can also think of change.
Yes.
When you are initiating the change. But almost any time it says stabilized, you have moved off of the attitude indicator.
Yeah.
The attitude indicator is when you start something, when you change something. Okay? A weird exception to that is that for bank, it is the primary bank indicator. And oddly, it's sort of the primary pitch indicator, although I don't think that's the correct book answer for a steep turn. Because you use the attitude indicator to fly a steep turn.
Could this be a question plus at a 300 feet per minute climb instead of cruise climb? And would that be
Instead of a cruise climb, if it says at 300 feet per minute, which one gives you feet per minute?
Yes.
Ta-da! This is what I'm trying to impart is not just are we reviewing the questions, but how do you think through them? How do you get to the right answer in the end? And some of the time, in fact, a significant portion of the time, the reason the question ends up on my slide is I got it wrong when I was going through practice stuff. And I was like, okay, why did I get that wrong? All right, which instrument provides the most pertinent information for pitch control in straight and level flight?
Altimeter. Oh, altimeter.
Okay, and how could you have figured that out if you were baffled at the moment?
Straight and level.
It says straight and level flight.
Oh, you can do this one.
Level.
Lateral. Oh, look at that. That would have been useful.
That's what I'm trying to teach you, Josh. How to take the test. All right. Also, how to learn, how to just internalize all this. What visual illusion creates the same effect as a narrower than usual runway?
B.
Downslope. Right? Yeah, downslope.
Because it looks like it's getting narrower.
Upsloping would make it wider.
Upsloping would be well, I think they're looking for whether it makes you below or above your normal glide.
Glide. Yeah.
Creates what effect does it create?
It's just
What effect does it create? Yeah, the way they ask the question sucks.
What effect creates?
Okay, do you guys remember tall, dark, and skinny?
Yes.
Yeah.
So tall, dark, and skinny.
A.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's upsloping. Tall, dark, and skinny. All right. I get the idea that because it's sloping up, you think it might look wider, but because it's sloping up, the further part is still narrower, and so it gives you this tall, skinny looking thing, and so you're going to be too high. So So you're going to think you're too high, which will cause you to fly lower. Tall, dark, and skinny is a bad day. Okay, that's how you can. That's all I got on there. All right. And look, I actually did it before 30 minutes this time.
Oh, there you go.
Timed this one better than before. So, in the review thing, all right, guys, next week we are 1/3 of the way through. All right, 5 weeks. So this is week 4. Next week is 1/3 of the way. Next week, this is not a secret, I have a little extra time in the schedule because of the way I built my schedule. So next week, there's definitely going to be a heavy emphasis on review. All right, so come prepared to get asked questions from all of the things we've done these 4 weeks, plus anticipate a little bit of what's coming next week, which is going to be on GPS. I say that because if you study 1/3 of the stuff for this week and really kind of get it locked in your head, it keeps you on track to go take your test at the end of this 15-week program and pass and not have to wait. You know, I would like to be the guy that gets to sign off on a whole bunch of people to go take written tests and they all pass them the first time with like 95s and, you know, look awesome. All right? Because, you know, then Dave can use that in advertising. Anyway. All right.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Does that mean next week is also on chapter 5?
Next week is on chapter 5 and 18. I think it's 18.
5 and 8.
GPS.
Yeah, GPS is. There's a whole additional chapter in the back. 18.
Good.
There you go. Okay? We're going to hit GPS stuff that's in chapter 5 today. What's that?
The question was, can you take your instrument written if you haven't earned your private pilot license yet?
You can. You should also be prepping. You got to go retake your private, right?
Yeah,
So-
I gotta take it for airplane.
Yeah. So
Yep.
you have 2 tests you're prepping for. Because you passed it once before, and if you listen to the study guidance that we're giving you, you can easily prep for both of them and go take them in the same day.
That's a rough day.
Book it at the same time.
So the truth is,
Same time.
what's that?
Same time slot. There you go.
You can't get on the stream.
Perfect.
So
Honestly, though,
where can I send her to look for it?
It's on my Bull's Nest account.
You gotta take this.
So I told her to look
don't have
on
that
the Google Classroom.
Yeah, hang on. All right, we're gonna take just a quick pause.
Oh.
So we're trying to help somebody get onto the stream.
Oh, I'm hitting the wrong thing.
What is the YouTube account called?
It's Bull's Nest Incorporated.
How'd you come up with that? Story.
It's a combination of 2 things. My family crest is a bull's head on a gold shield. It was a kind of a big thing when I was growing up. My whole family knew about it, you know. So, big black bull's head on a gold shield. And then my grandparents owned a farm that everybody referred to as the Eagle's Nest because it had a bunch of eagles that were nested on it. But they built a gigantic barn, and I started calling it the Bull's Nest. And then I'm like, flying bulls. Come on. It's like Pegasus the bull. So,
That's wicked that you have a family crest.
Yeah.
Do you guys have family crests?
Yeah.
You have family crest?
They got me find it.
You look back on it.
Now I have one. It's like a just strong lion.
Yeah, here it is.
Lion. Yeah.
that's my family crest.
It's a lion on a shield.
Family crest is
It's just
No, it's a
Hello Teachers Tech.
Okay.
Our live stream
Of course.
on the YouTube channel. Now,
It's a
you
Welsh
can live
symbol.
stream to a select group of people, anybody.
sausage.
But no, like we always
Oh yeah, so their last instructor here,
also
his mom's like a stream teacher, like created behind the wall at East Germany.
So, you still got her there?
hopefully it's relevant.
So if she goes to YouTube, at Bull's Nest Inc., .1945.
Okay, I see it here. I'm just gonna send her a link to it.
There you go. Did you find the live stream?
I did.
And look, 4 is going right now.
Yeah, you should be watching the live stream at the same time.
No, because then it will just turn into Echo Land. Don't do that to anybody. That's mean.
You think everything's hit twice? Twice.
Okay.
If it catches you.
Of course, I just. There we go. Okay. So, today's discussion is on electronic navigation. All right. The topic is a little complicated to do for the test. It's actually odd because it's easier when it comes to actually flying the airplane and what you're actually going to have to demonstrate on a practical test. Because the FAA has not updated most of this section, and so there's a bunch of antiquated questions on it. All right?
Or NDBs.
So, what's that?
NDBs.
So NDBs. Here's what I'm going to tell you about NDBs. I'm not going to talk about them at all. Here's how you study for the NDBs. You go find all of the NDB questions on Prepware. So you guys all have the Prepware software as part of the package about the class. Just go find those NDB questions. It talks about, Mary had roast beef, the magnetic heading, relative bearing equals true heading. I can't teach you how to answer those any better than you can just look them up and basically kind of memorize those questions. Because here's the deal. They are not writing any new questions about NDBs. All of the questions you see, you'll be able to find them verbatim. So don't waste your virtual. Do you disagree with the advice I'm about?
I agree, and by the time we take them, there's going to be fewer and fewer. They are weeding questions out. We just don't know when.
Yeah, so definitely look at them. In fact, I would suggest you look at them like this week. Go and look at NDB questions. I am not going to talk about them at all. All right? I am going to very briefly touch on RMIs. Not because there are questions on the test, but I need to talk about them because you're going to see something else that looks like an RMI that isn't an RMI, a remote magnetic indicator. But you need to know they work similar, but they're not exactly the same. Does that make sense? All right. So we're going to talk mostly tonight about VORs. And then we're going to talk about GPS. We're going to touch on something else, but that's what we're going to focus on. The vast majority of the questions you're going to get on the test are actually about VORs. Now, VORs are being dramatically reduced, but there is a minimum operational network that they're going to keep alive. Why are we keeping the minimum operational network alive?
For when the Chinese take over a satellite system.
That's 100% right. The Chinese or the Chinese or the Ukrainians or the Russians or the solar flares, if something knocks out our satellite system. So what's appealing about VORs that would make us want to keep them?
Don't run on satellite.
That is absolutely 100% true.
And they're ground-based.
They're ground-based. They're protectable. They're defensible. They're repairable. What's that?
They're distributed. I mean, they have to knock out every VOR to knock out every VOR.
Yeah, because they are,
Independent.
in the strictest terms, they are independent. They do not run off of each other. Also, it's proven and reliable, and the entire population of pilots up until this point has been taught at least something about them. And so we're going to continue to learn about them. So the VOR stuff is that, okay? So with that in mind, the first slide in this seems completely out of place. Just bear in mind that I put it here because I want you to ingrain this in your head. So I put it someplace a little shocking. And that is, anybody here know what the 6 T's are?
Second 50s.
What's that?
They came just after the 50s. No.
Mr. Machado is rubbing off on you.
I know.
6 tangos.
Turn, time, twist, throttle, talk, track.
Let's see, did I get them in the same order as you? Why are you not?
Did you rip it off your iPad?
No, I didn't. I'm
Okay.
talking about alcohol.
Right. So turn, time, twist, throttle, talk, track. This slide is in my deck more than once. Okay? Also, I always struggled with this. Like, it was a hugely painful thing for me to remember for some reason. And here's why. Number one, if you try to look this up, you will find that some people use 5 T's, some people use 6 T's, some people use 7 T's. The little tiny scribble up there that you cannot possibly read from back, I don't know, Virgil, can you read it?
Can't make that.
Okay, it was done that way on purpose, because that's my fine print.
There are many
This is
variants of
very
this
fine.
checklist.
There are many variants of this checklist. Okay? This, I specifically said, are NAI's 6 T's, because this is how Dave teaches it. Alright? And since I was not married to anything, I'm teaching what Dave teaches. I'm kind of assuming that this is what you teach. So, these are the 6 T's. Now, my addition to this was, I always had trouble figuring out the order and kind of understanding what I'm actually looking for. So on the slide, it says, turn. Do I need a course or heading change here? Alright? And this is usually the inciting event for doing the rest of the T's. If you have to turn, you have changed your direction. Turn or climb on occasion. So, but if you change your direction, do I need a turn here? If so, turn. Time. Should I start a timer? The answer is easy. Yes. If you turn, you probably want to start a timer. Partly because in the modern era, flying on GPS, you most of the time won't need that timer. But if your GPS cracks the bed, you'll already have it running. All right? And you will learn as we go why the timer is important when your GPS isn't working. Okay? Twist. Do I need to change a frequency or the OBS setting or both? All right? So that one was the one that always kind of got me because my instructors never explained to me what the twist was both of them. You can change the frequency or you can change the OBS setting. Throttle. Do I need to climb, descend, or change speed? Because if I need to climb, descend, or change speed, I will probably need a throttle change. Not always. You can do a cruise climb where you just raise the nose a little bit. You can obviously descend if you want to do a current speed descent. You can, if you want to do a high speed descent, you can drop the nose and go. All right. Talk. Do I need to let ATC know I'm here? Really what this is am I supposed to say something as our mandatory report? Do I need to talk to somebody or should I talk to somebody? And if you don't know if you should talk to somebody, what do?
Do it.
What was that? I heard it behind you.
Give him a call. Do it.
When in doubt, so we used to have this saying in the Army, if you don't know if you're supposed to salute, when in doubt, whip it out. Is that going to stick in your head?
Yeah.
Are you blushing? There you go. But here's the point. So when in doubt, just call. Get on the radio. Say, hey, I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you this, but I just crossed, juicy intersection. I don't know why I can't remember juicy.
That's
All right, and then track. Now, Dave said, so the 5 or the first first 5 are common almost in all of them, all of the versions of this. So, turn, time, twist, throttle, top. Turn, time, twist, throttle. Track. Dave's point was, it's kind of the whole point here. You're supposed to track something on the way up, but this is your chance to be, what am I tracking? Am I tracking a VOR? Am I tracking an NDB? Am I on the right thing? Are my radios set to track the right thing? And then keep on. Follow the line you're supposed to follow. Okay? So, here at NAI, this is what we mean when we talk about 6Ts. We're going to be consistent from private through commercial that this is what we're going to use. You may go to another school, you may fly with another instructor, you may fly with another instructor here that may have a 5T version or a 7T version or a 9T version. Except that this is a mnemonic to help you do something. I'm going to hammer this one at you. All right? So this is one, the 5Ts will not, as a question, will not show up on your written test. Some variant of this shows up in your orals and it's part of your practical. Because you have to do these things over and over again. All right, so VOR navigation. We said we're going to keep it ground-based, proven technology. It's a backup to the GPS, and it's still on the written test. There are a lot of possible questions on the written test about VORs. And I'll be the first one to tell you, even if you know how to fly a VOR, some of them will cause you to be like, okay, what do they mean by that? You got to work through them. So when you are studying, as you go through these, there's going to be some that you just should be like, yep, I know those. Set those off to the side. You don't need to look at those again. If you have to pause, take time to really learn those. And then I think you said you have some advice on how to do some VOR questions.
Oh yeah, there
Tricks.
are a lot of tricks. Yeah, you can use like a hand thing to kind of cover areas because it'll ask, which direction from the VOR are you?
Yeah, so bear in mind, Virtual?
One other reason is because your GPS has modes where it acts like a VOR, right?
Oh yeah.
In the GPS, you can tell I want to follow a certain heading or a certain radial into a VOR, and so this is not wasted effort. You will use this. You'll just use it in the GPS instead of actually with a real VOR.
Well, so and all the skills for doing a VOR. If you can fly VORs, flying GPS is easy. Yeah. Is that a reasonable statement?
Yeah.
So. Okay, first thing, we've all seen a sectional. So, can you tell that there are two VORs on this chunk of sectional? Okay, in fact, it's Lewiston and Pullman. Alright? So, from back where you are, can you guys read the information about those VORs?
Yeah.
No, okay. So, I bring that up because this is a low altitude en route chart. This is what we use. Do you notice something interesting about the VORs on this chart compared to the previous chart?
Different size.
Okay. Those are as close as I can humanly come to having them the exact same zoom. I literally just changed the layer.
I think he was
But even on
meaning
the
that
drawing, they're
Lewiston
different
is
sizes.
They're different sizes. That has to do with, no, they're both low altitude VOR. I don't know why this one's that way. I'm going to tell you that right now. What I will tell you though is, you notice that the information for tuning in those VORs is massive compared to the sectional. All right. So if I go back to the sectional, what do you see on the sectional that seems super important? What about how it's done is emphasized?
Airspace for VFR.
Okay, for VFR, but terrain and airspace. And things you can see on the ground pop out. Like all that little yellow stuff that says, hey, that's a town. Okay, so I can see Lewiston. The nav aids are secondary on here. They're hard to see. Sometimes it's hard. You will notice that they will put the box a long way away sometimes if it's going to cover up something on the map like a mountain or a hill or a town. They'll scooch it around for that. All right. Low altitude en route chart. Man, all it really is where the airports are and where the nav aids are, and then how they connect. All right, and a bunch of numbers that are going to tell you minimum altitudes, the minimum altitude that you can fly, the minimum altitude that you can reliably receive the ground-based navigational aid. The maximum distance that you should be able to catch it on a specific airway, all that information's on it. And we're not going to go into that all today. That's actually a whole other lesson, reading the chart. And frankly, I need to do a bunch of review because I thought I knew the answer to something and then I realized I forgot it. So, but the black lines represent Victor Airways. These are airways that specifically connect ground-based navigators. All right. The blue lines, anybody know what the blue lines are for?
Those military airways?
No.
Those are for RNAV?
RNAV specifically,
They're RNAV waypoints?
no, specifically, there are more than one kind of RNAV. This is what's going to throw people off. RNAV GPS.
Yes.
So, blue lines are RNAV GPS routes. They're T routes, and then I forgot the higher altitude one. Who mentioned-
J.
No, J routes are actually high altitude, land based connected. Am I getting that right?
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's J route. There's yeah, Virgil, if you happen to pull up what the other blue routes are.
Pull it up. So it says there are H and F,
I've never even heard of those.
and just outside of.
Oh, Q routes is what I'm saying.
Okay.
So you can also have Q routes. Q routes, I believe, are, and this Virgil will research later. Actually, I'm not going to say the answer that I think it is because I don't want to screw it up. I just know Q routes are GPS based. T routes are GPS based.
They do have J routes.
J routes are ground based, but they are high level jet.
Yeah,
routes.
those are, yeah.
So, and then you'll notice I keep talking about low level and high level. All right? High level is everything above 24,000 feet. Flight level 240 becomes high level. And then below 24,000 feet, you have low level. And then we all know that Class A airspace ends at
18,000.
flight level 180. So 18,000 feet.
So
But the
change
low
to
level-
charts doesn't happen the same place as the change to flight levels.
No.
It's interesting.
Because low level flight, you're doing low level in the Class A and the top of the, the Echo Golf. So, all right.
Is that because of pressure differences, or why does it start at 24,000?
The 24,000, there's a whole bunch of rules that come into play, like RVSM, which is
Reduced vertical.
reverse vertical separation minimums. So the air gets so thin that altimeters are less.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of rules, and that's also everything up there moves much faster and flies higher. We may go up to 40,000, 50,000 feet. All right. So all I really wanted you to get off of this, though, is for us, what we really care about is the navigator. Now, it's funny because I'm a VFR pilot, I find that I tend to revert to the sectional chart when I do all my planning and stuff. Because it's a familiar book, But there are times when you want to pop over to the low altitude and route chart, because it will give you options that you didn't realize you had. All right. So VOR transmitters. So the VOR system really consists of a ground-based transmitter and an airborne radio in your aircraft, and specifically some antennas on your aircraft that have to be put on. All right. The ground-based system. First of all, it looks like a giant sombrero sitting on the ground. The taco stand, right? But when you fly over them, they look like a sombrero. It's got this pointy thing in the middle and little fringes all the way around it. All right. Technically speaking, that taco stand is broadcasting 2 different frequencies. All right, and this is what's important. It's Voodoo Magic. It's not 360 different frequencies. It's 2. One is called the omnidirectional frequency. It broadcasts out all the time. It's just on. The other is a rotating beacon frequency, and it rotates around 360 degrees. And the interaction of those 2 frequencies is deciphered in your radio through Voodoo Magic to create 360 distinct radios. All right? So, how is this different from an NDB?
An NDB is non-directional, so it looks the same from every direction.
The NDB only has the omnidirectional broadcast. It's also at a different frequency band, and I'm not. There's whole discussions about like radio wave propagation theory and crap in the books. Do not spend 1,000 years on those questions. You will not get questions about, which radio waves hug the earth and which radio waves don't. What I will tell you is VHF radios are all line of sight. You have to have a clear line of sight between VHF radios to see. And the VOR is a VHF system. So you have to have line of sight. And that's partly how they control the system, because they can reduce how far with broadcast strength you can actually receive this. We only have a limited number of frequencies we can use. All right, so we talked about the VOR. Oh, also, you guys are all private pilots, right?
No.
Almost. Okay, pretty much. But so you had VOR as part of your ground school. So hopefully this is basically a review for you. What I will tell you is, if you just don't get what a VOR does, come get with me and we'll go into it. Otherwise, we'll be here for days. All right, 360 radios. What is distinct about a radial that makes you know what radial it is? How do we identify radials?
Difference in phase between the omni and the out of phase? Is that what you're asking?
That's not what I'm asking. You are correct. Your radio uses that to identify what radial you're on. But how do we name a radial?
Degrees.
The degrees
Coming from.
coming from. Perfect. The degrees coming from. Radial means to go out. It radiates out. So the radial is always the line drawn from the center of the VOR in the direction it's going. So the 180 degree radial from a VOR is where in relation to the VOR?
South.
There you go. The 090 radial is where in relation to the VOR?
West. East.
I think that's so.
We'll go with the east. I do too. But so 360 radial is where? North of the VOR. If you can get that concept in your head, that's like 2/3 of understanding what a VOR does and how it works.
Magnetic or true?
Magnetic. And there's actually going to be something else that we're going to talk about in here. Because I went and did research on something after our little flight. Alright, so VOR and magnetic azimuth. Oh, look at this slide. Because the magnetic North Pole moves, the VORs have to periodically be updated. Alright? Which is awesome. Except they don't all get updated at the same time. So, this specifically is the Ocala, Florida VOR to the Gators VOR. On Victor 441, if you look very, very closely, you are flying on the 355 radial from Ocala, and you're going to come in on the 179 radial to Gators. What is the reciprocal of 179? 351. I actually wrote it up there, right? 351. So in theory, it says you went, okay, I'm cruising along, I'm going at 355 degrees, and then I should be going to 351 degrees, but the line doesn't bend. It's straight. Because they're updated at different times. Those two VORs are updated at different times. And I literally pulled this off the chart yesterday. So here's the thing. You are not flying at a magnetic heading of either 355 or 351. You are flying at whatever the magnetic heading, if you went and drew it on the chart and did all the math today, whatever that is, it's somewhere in that general area, it's going to be close. You are never, ever specifically flying the same magnetic heading as the radial you are on. They're just close, kind of close enough. By the time you throw in wind correction and just crappy, sloppy pilotage, you fly the needle. And this is, when we came back, I think we were doing something, and if you program in a route in a GPS, it will give you a heading that doesn't match what you think you're supposed to get, because the GPS is correcting for all of these things, and it flies from point A to point B. We're not flying from point A to point B. We are flying on the radial as defined from that VOR. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And does that make sense, Virtual, after our discussion last week?
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I had to go down a weird rabbit hole to figure out that the bottom line is the magnetic azimuth and the magnetic rose on a VOR is not necessarily currently aligned to the isogonic lines on your map.
So if I was flying this route between the two, I would change my heading to the second one when we're out there, right? Because that's actually directly to it is, I mean, it's the same route it says. But
Your heading won't actually change because what will happen is between your wind. So the 355 radial from Ocala is directly in line with the 179 radial from Gator. They are one on top of the other. Even though, because the one north on one is canted just a little bit compared to the other. But the heading you will actually fly is probably somewhere between 351 and 355 degrees. It's somewhere in there. And by the time you throw wind correction on there, you'll be crabbed a little bit one way or another. What's important to know is if you are flying a course, because we're going to talk about GPSs here in a bit, the heading the GPS gives you is going to be the actual magnetic heading connecting those 2 points given the current isogonic variance. Did I get that word right? Variance. Okay? So, and this is something that had me stumped up until this week, just because of a couple things that have happened to me recently. All right. So here's your taco stand, and I really throw that up there. Pullman is easy to find. So Pullman is interesting because the VOR is not even close to the field. It's out in the middle of the field in the wide open, and it's really easy to see it. So I like to take students down to fly over it so that you can kind of see. And then you can turn and follow it into Pullman itself, and it gives you kind of the opportunity to really get a feel for what this means. All right?
And then the Coeur d'Alene one's just right at the field, so if you land on runway 16 and look out your window.
You see it as you go by? Yep. Okay. So to identify a VOR, to make sure you've got the right one dialed in and you're receiving and that it's working, what do? Listen to Morse code. You have to know Morse code? Because it's written right there. All right? And the Morse code is slow enough that you can just, you can pick it out based off of reading the little dots and dashes. All right? At most, you have to listen for 4 letters. Okay? Do you ever have to listen for 4 letters at a VOR?
Yeah.
Who said yeah? Why would you have to listen for 4 letters at a VOR?
Because you said at most you have to listen for 4 letters.
Yeah, I said that, but what I was saying is when you're listening for the Morse codes while you're identifying ground-based systems, the most you have to listen for is 4 letters.
VOR identifiers are always 3 alpha characters, never numbers. They're always just 3 letters.
Always 3 letters. So when do you have to listen for a 4th letter?
It's got DME.
Not DME. DME has another little code that it makes a higher pitched sound when it comes around. About every 30 seconds, and you do need to know that.
Yeah. Is it when you're doing the VOR check?
Nope. You're just kind of guessing now.
Localizers, because
Localizers.
they'll put an I and then the name of the facility.
And we're going to get to the difference between a VOR and a localizer. Does anybody know what it is?
Localizers right at the airport.
So, but the VOR is right at Coeur d'Alene.
Localizer is a much more specific, it's smaller.
Oh yeah, it only projects the ones.
3 to 6
Localized.
degrees.
It's localized. And usually, it's generally narrower. There's a weird exception to that. But, so, the VOR has 365 radials. Strictly speaking, a localizer has 2. Front course and back course.
Gotcha.
All right, and most localizers are 3 to 6 degrees wide. Each radial on a VOR, how wide is it? You may know.
20?
No.
But I know I know how you got there.
You mean what is a full deflection on your instrument?
No, the radial is actually technically 10 degrees wide. That's the way the FAA puts it is that the radials they overlap. There's one every 1 degree, but yes, and a full deflection is 10 degrees. Partly because at half scale deflection you are still on the airway at most mid-course changes. All right, VOR radios, and I threw this up here. Typical VOR, this is by any book, right? We all understand that if you have a comm nav radio, that is actually 2 radios in the same box. Does that make sense? You have a communication radio and you have a navigation radio. And so like the old King radios that you see in older planes, sometimes it'll just be a nav radio, sometimes it'll just be a comm radio. Lots of times it's both. This is also a VOR radio. The Garmin 530, the Garmin 430. Now, not all GPS have nav radios built into them, but the typical stack that you see with a 430 or a 530, that radio set is actually several radios jammed in there. Because you've got the GPS receiver, you have the VOR receiver, you have the comm receiver, you have you have a glide slope receiver. The glide slope receiver is automatically tuned with the localizer receiver. Same knob. Some DME installations, when you turn in the localizer, automatically tune the DME. Some don't. You may know what DME is?
Director measuring equipment.
Almost. So close. Distance. There we go. All right. So, but I throw this up here because people forget that the GPS is also a VOR radio. What changes it from being VOR, from being an FM VOR radio to being a GPS receiver, functionally?
It has a GPS antenna and can interpret the signals.
No, from an operational perspective.
It's a frequency, right?
Not the frequency.
There's a CDI button, and when you poke it, it'll either...
See where it says GPS above CPI right now? CDI? When you poke that button, it'll say LOC, L-O-C, or VLOC.
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 So that's for VOR localizer. All right? You are telling it what mode you want it to operate in. Which of the radios is providing information to your autopilot, if it's connected to your autopilot, and to your Omni display, otherwise known as your CDI, your course deviation indicator. All right? So if you are in GPS mode and your Omni is giving you left or right guidance, that guidance is different than if you are in VOR mode. All right? Also, if you are getting vertical guidance and you are in GPS mode, that is not ILS guidance, Instrument Landing System guidance, that is GPS vertical guidance. And you need to know whether or not it is true vertical guidance or advisory guidance, which we'll cover here in a minute. We doing okay so far? All right. And this is, because I'm a semantics guy, the VOR Omni display, the CDI is technically the little needle in the middle. I don't know. Just in case somebody gets super semantic on you. I know of no questions that will kill you with that. You should know, though, that the very, very top, the little tick up there, is called the index. And it's a rotating compass card. All right. Course deviation indicator. Ambiguity indicator. Swings from and to. All right. And it's extremely important to know if we are in a from mode or a to mode. All right. And I forgot exactly where I wanted to go into something. But OBS. So the Omni brake selector is also known as the OBS knob or the OBS. But so the OBS is how you rotate and select which radial you want to be on. All right. if you are flying toward a VOR, which ambiguity indicator do you think we want to see?
2.
Okay, and we all chuckle.
0.
What happens if it reads from?
Then you have reverse sensing.
Very good. Okay, and we'll go into reverse sensing later, but we already know what reverse sensing is. Okay? If you are in the 2 mode, so right now, what rate, okay, so that's in front. If it was in the 2 mode, what radial would you be on?
Then 180.
And how do we know that?
Because that's the one that makes this.
Because 180 is on the bottom. All right. If you're going to it, read the number on the bottom. If you're going from and you're flying away from, you read the number at the top. And this is something that I think is like worth ingraining in your brain. All right. The radial you are on is read at the top or the bottom, depending on which way you are sensing.
So this picture you're saying you're going from 0 or north, right?
Yeah, we are flying away from.
Yeah. So you were there, and now you're flying away.
We flew over the little round circle in the middle. I've learned recently that some people refer to that as the donut. The donut represents your aircraft's location in there. All right, and the line of the CDI represents your desired course. If you are in forward sensing mode, if you're in the appropriate mode. All right, so navigating with your VOR. So the VOR needle deflection is how far the little needle is moving. This is VOR speak, or FAA speak thing. How far you are off course is called your course deviation. And in GPS, course deviation is also referred to as cross-track error. Okay? So your CDI, and in this case, you are flying away from 0. And yeah, I thought I said this backwards for a second. You're flying away from the field, so you read your radial at the top. So your course and your radial are the same. They are both 360. And in this case, we're showing a full course, full deflection. My plane, the little donut, is to the left of my course. And since I'm set up for proper sensing, I would want to turn to the right to come back in.
Why is it to the left?
What's that?
Why is it to the left?
The airplane is to the left of the course. So the desired course is 360. We are dialed in for the 360 radial from.
Yeah.
So we read it at the top. From is at the top. If you've got the little triangles, they actually point. It points in the direction that you should be looking at. And because we are 5 dots, that's 10 degrees. Each dot represents 2 degrees of course deviation. So each dot of deflection represents 2 degrees of course deviation. The outside edge of the donut on some CDI, on some OBS, is actually the 2 degree point. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10.
Yeah.
That is not universal. That depends on who makes it. If you have 5 dots, each dot is 2 degrees. If you only have 4 dots, normally the donut counts as 2 degrees.
Like that one.
But they usually go out to 10 degrees, however it happens.
10 to 2. Full deflection is 10 to 12 degrees by regulation. All right. The trick is, if you are fully deflected, you don't know if you're at 10 or if you're at 50.
Right.
On this,
The last dot should always be 10.
10 to 12.
it's about approximately 10, but there's 10 to 12 degrees. All right.
That's the answer. Yeah.
So there you go. So this little picture here shows you. So we're flying north on the 180 radial because we're going to it. So I'm starting at the bottom. So the bottom plane is flying north. it is 5 degrees off of the center line to the left. As you get closer, even though it is the same distance from the center line, it is slowly getting more and more degrees from the center line. Until you see at B, we are 10 degrees off of center line. Okay?
Even though they're the same literal distance from that.
Same lateral distance. Yep. So the same distance. So when a VOR is driving your CDI, you are reading angular displacement.
And so the reason we're 10 degrees to the left, my instincts say you'd be 10 to the right because it's on the right, but it's because you're going towards, you have to like flip it upside down in your head. So you're going towards 1 and 0.
You are currently, the donut is left of the course.
Yeah, the donuts you're playing the line.
The needle is the line.
Yeah.
But so the needle is on, I am currently,
On the flight.
let me see where it
Yeah,
goes.
that's why I'm
It's
thinking
easier
about
if you've flown 6, 9, or 8 too.
Yeah, but it just.
Yep.
It says the same thing on the GPS.
So this right here, my dot is to the left, so I am half deflection to the left.
Yes.
If I wanted to get back to the line, what would I do?
Fly to the right.
I would turn to the right. Okay, and as long as you understand that, you're spot on. All right. So here, what am I?
It looks like you're fully deflected to the left.
So I am a full scale deflection to the left. I am 10 degrees to the left. Now I stayed exactly the same distance from my course. I'm flying parallel to that radial, which there's sometimes really good guys will do this on purpose for things. Most people are flying to the VOR and then away from the VOR, to the VOR, away from the VOR. You should be trying to center your needles. That's your goal. Get your needle centered, all right? Now this, I have to bring up HSIs now because of the way that the diagrams came out. What is an HSI? Anybody know?
Situation indicator.
Horizontal situation indicator. So that's what it's called. What is it?
It's the VOR's older brother. And much more smart.
True. I'm going to give you that one.
It's easier to read than a VOR.
Why is it easier to read?
Because it corrects for reverse sensing.
That's part of the reason. So what is an HSI really?
VOR.
It's a directional gyro and the VOR
Oh,
CDI
yeah.
built into one instrument.
Yeah.
So it takes up
It's
one
the-
less
it's
slot on your panel.
It's the love child of a CDI and a DG. All right? And typically, it goes one step further because it's the love child that actually graduated from college because it automatically orients to magnetic north. Typically. All right? Also, you need to understand HSIs because almost every glass panel now uses what's called an EHSI. What is that? An electronic HSI. The display for your directional gyro and your course deviation indicator is an EHSI. So this is what you're going to see. You're going to see questions like this on the test that use old school HSIs. I'm sure they're phasing in new questions, but most of the questions, they haven't changed the book yet. So you can go through and look at what they put on there. But so there's a whole lot more stuff on there. But the bottom line is the course indicator always points in the direction that the selected course that you want to go to. That little yellow arrow on the top up here. Your flags are your to from. If the flag is pointing in the same direction as your arrow, you're flying to this VOR. If it's in the bottom, if it's pointing, then you're flying away from the VOR. Ta-da! All right. So
when you cross over, they do a little, as if you're directly over one.
when you go over it, this little white arrow. So if I centered up and then I flew straight over it, little white arrow is going to disappear for a second, and then it's going to start pointing towards your tail. All right? That is called a full course reversal. It's exactly the same thing that happens in a regular CDI. Sometimes the regular CDI will give you the little red bar thing for a second and then flip over. Very often, if you're flying at a good enough clip, it just goes chunk and it flips over from one to the other. Full course reversal. And throw this up here, this sequencing of this class was really, really difficult because everything kind of bleeds together. But so radials and courses, all right? So if you look here, we're south. Our course is north because that's where the yellow course pointer is. We are flying towards the VOR and we're on course. All right? Then we cross the VOR and the little white pointer points at our tail. And now we are on the 360 radial away from. 1802, 360 from. In the HSI, the little arrow points away from the radial if you're going the right direction. Which, if you were like going a weird direction, the HSI would be pointed off to the side.
Yeah, Nicole does have a good trick about that too.
Does she?
I forget what it was, but I don't get that.
It's okay. If not today, next week we're going to go over tricks and ways to get through the test. All right. So selecting your course. Remember this. Your course is usually the left knob. When you dial that, you are changing the course you are trying to select for the VOR. In EHSIs, if you're on a GPS, that course thing will automatically change on you if you're cycling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But if you're flying on the VOR, it does not. You have to know that it's your job to then say, hey, this is the course I want. Okay? Also, it is a very, very good idea once you get established, you center your needle, and your needle stops drifting. At some point, your course is not going to point the same way that you're actually heading. Heading is which way your plane is pointing. All right? Why would they not line up? Say it loud.
Wind.
Why are you always whispering, man? I mean, you know I'm just going to tell you to speak up. Wind. So when you get your wind correction angle set, it's a very good idea to immediately set your heading bug to match your wind correction angle, usually. All right? Use those tools for you, because then you can see if, A, you're drifting off of the intended heading, which is what's keeping you on your desired course, and you can also see if the wind changes dramatically. Because if suddenly you need to change that wind correction because you're coming off course but holding heading, then you know that there's been a change. All right? So use that tool. All right? Heading bugs have nothing to do with the written test, just so you know. I don't think there's a single question about heading bugs on the written test. All right, intercepting a VOR. So how do we intercept a VOR? All right? So I can't draw a VOR, but so I got my VOR out here, and I'm in a plane down here, and I want to fly to this VOR on the 180 radial. How am I going to do this?
Turn right. You're gonna dial in the 1.8. Well, you're gonna find the frequency and tune your radio into that.
Okay.
Make sure the VOR is working and everything.
So we're going to tune and identify the VOR. Very good.
And then you're gonna put the 180 radio into your VOR.
Technically, you're putting it into the Omni, but into your. So you're gonna have, so you got 180 dialed in. So now, how am I going to fly? My plane's over here. So what is my VOR going to look like? My Omni.
Fully deflecting.
Yeah, right.
I would go with that. Fully deflected to the right. And what's my flag indicator going to be?
Oh, I don't know. I just had a question. Sorry.
Okay, I'll come back. So what was that?
2.
Okay, so right now,
What did we set our OBS to?
I don't know that we actually specifically said. We said dialed in the 180 radial, but
What number should we set it to?
360. 360.
Or,
180. No, but that'd be worse.
but that's hard to fly.
It's complicated stuff, man.
So 3602. So the radial is right at the bottom. I will have something up here later about reciprocals and how to calculate reciprocals. You know what the easiest way to calculate a reciprocal is?
Add 200, subtract 20. Or subtract 2.
No,
Plus 2
10.
minus 2.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Plus 2 minus 2 is
Yeah.
one way. You know the way I like to do it? Dial the OBS,
Look at the lump.
and I decide if I need it on the bottom, I put it on the bottom. If I need it on top, I need it on top. I also will take my wind. You can take the wind side of your E6B.
Yeah.
Whatever's on top, the one on the bottom is the reciprocal. Alright? If you're trying to if you're ever struggling, if you've ever had a long day and you're like, I know which way the wind's coming from, but I don't know what the best runway is, put the wind on your wind side of your E6B, and then just compare the different runway numbers. And you can, like, right on your E6B, you're carrying a tool that can help you stop from having to do complex mental math. You can even draw on it with a pencil. It's made to do that. All right, so we have 3602 full right deflection. What are we going to do, Andrew? Oh, I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering why. I understand that it's to the right of full deflection, but the plane is to the left. So why is it to the right?
Because
the plane
course
is
The plane is the donut. The course is to my right.
okay.
You want to fly to your course.
To your course.
That's only if we're dialed in right. If we had dialed in 180, we'd be all screwed up.
Gotcha.
Because if we dialed in 180, what would it look? What would my CDI look like?
On the left.
Yeah.
And then the line, the CDI now becomes the plane, and the donut becomes your course. That's the only
Don't
way.
do that.
That's the only way I can think about
That
it.
hurts.
If it's reverse sensing.
So your VOR should always have the same hemisphere in, essentially, to not get reverse sensing.
Yeah, kind of the big bottom line is avoid reverse sensing, avoid reverse sensing, avoid reverse sensing. And to do that, if you're flying to the VOR, you should have a to. If you're flying away from the VOR, you should have a from. And then you go from there. But so in this case, like I said, we're on the 180 radial, we're going to it. I actually set 180 at the bottom. If I'm going to it, it goes on the bottom. If I'm coming from it, it goes at the top.
And this is Nicole's trick makes it really, really easy. That's it makes it easier to explain. I don't know if you remember your trick you showed me, but
I do remember.
yeah, but just blocking out, it can only have 4 quarters of it, and the needle's telling you one, and the heading's telling you the other, and then you know which one of those 4 quarters you're going to be going towards. I mean, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but
Well, if it has a 2 flag, then you cover up the bottom, and then whichever side the needle's on, you cover up the other side, and the VOR is that way, and you are the other way.
Yeah.
Which is really easy for when you're taking the written test for private pilots.
for this, it's probably not complicated enough. But
No, it's not that complicated.
Just made my head hurt.
If you're flying
It's
to,
easier if you show you
if you're going towards, you need to have a to indication on your OBS. If you dial it in and you know you're going toward the VOR, and you dial something in and it gives you a from, you know you put the wrong, you put the reciprocal in. And to me, it's just easier to, if I'm going to it, I put 180 on the bottom. If I'm going from it, I put it on the top.
That's just the U thing. It's not a.
Well, that's how the thing works.
Okay, so why can't you have the other way around?
Because if you have it the other way around, your needle swings the wrong direction.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Okay, so this is all about intercepting the course. So what are we going to do?
Turn right.
Turn right. So we turn right, and for the sake of speed, we come. So we go this. We turn right.
That's quick.
Yep.
Wow.
And our plane is now cruising along this way, right?
5,696 knots.
So now, I'm like much less than a full deflection, but it's still a little bit to the right. But if I was sitting, oh, and 2.
You're also not to scale, in case you were wondering.
Yeah, very good.
I was just about to say that.
Everyone's a critic, man.
I do not have that skill set. So if you had 180 on the top, Jesus, your CDI would have tried to go further away. Okay, that's why it's important that you. The big difference between that. Okay, so when we turned right, how did I pick how far to turn to the right?
Half of the off course.
Actually, you want to intercept at somewhere between a 20 to a 45 degree angle. I was way off, so I went for more of a 45. You want to intercept before you're going to get to the VOR. All right. You can technically intercept at 90 degrees. You can turn completely to the right. In fact,
Not very efficient.
unless you're about to do a DME arc. Sometimes then you want to come just straight into it. But also, if you are way over like this, we were way over, you could start dialing in radials that were closer to at least figure out how far off you were and then turn and dial in. I'm not going to go into crazy nuance about VOR tracking.
So what they say is to figure out how far off you are, you put the course you want, and then the course until it says you're going straight to it. And then you divide it by half and you make that your intercept, which is, right? Is that the correct way they say to do it?
That is a way.
Okay.
So,
I mean,
realistically, you don't have to do calculus.
No, you don't do that.
If you only go halfway, you're gonna intercept halfway up the line. Sometimes you need to get on the track further or earlier. Sometimes you got lots and lots of time and you can kind of meander over there. But the big thing is you usually don't want to intercept at more than a 45 degree angle because that makes you have to do a big 90 degree turn. Or you can anticipate it and come in. You know what I mean?
You can, learn from me from my lessons in the sim with you earlier. You don't want to be chasing that needle.
It's a lot harder to get the needle to settle down if you come in at a really aggressive angle. 30 degrees is the preferred intercept angle. And then once you're on, you're just going to deal with whatever the next turns are as you're going.
And if you go to 91 degrees, is your needle going to change sides? If you go past?
No, the needle does not care what direction you are pointed.
Okay.
All right? You will start doing weird stuff. But
What's the difference between this instrument VOR or omnidirectional and the electric one? The electronic one, and the little one on the radio. The only one I have in my plane is just one little radio with a bar, and it just goes, you know what I'm talking about? The right? Yeah.
So we don't have a circular one?
you have a digital...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the digital one... All right. I don't think I have pictures of this, so we'll do it this way.
Yeah, I've never used this. That's why I'm like, how is this?
Yeah, so the needle, the windshield wiper style?
Yeah.
Okay.
That one seems easy to me. But
I actually prefer the straight line ones, but... So, what we've been drawing... Donut with like a windshield wiper. And this is my half-scale deflection. The other round one that you will see looks more like the HSI, but you have a donut, and then you just have a bar.
It also looks like an egg.
that's true.
Yeah, my circle's not circled. Alright. So this one, the whole bar moves left and right. The old one, it moved like a windshield wiper. Only reason for that difference is it was mechanically easier to make the first one. The older ones tend to be windshield wiper style. Then we got better engineering, better technology, and we can make ones that scroll like this. If you look at the HSI, if you locked the HSI so that it only sat up and down, that's what it is. Your electronic ones, so you're talking about one that looks like a little rectangle.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's got a circle in the middle probably, or a dot.
It's like a line with like a circle or something.
Yeah, and then you got...
Yeah. And then the lines like fill up which side, depending on the direction.
And it would look like that.
Yeah, but it'd be full. Like there'd be lines all the way to it.
And then it just
Oh, it goes like...
kind of gets...
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay?
That's weird.
Does it
Yeah.
also have a to from flag?
Yes, it has to have
It
a
does have a two from, I think top left of it or something like that.
Yeah, it's usually on one side.
Cool.
something like,
Yeah, you
okay.
just want to center the shaded looking stuff.
Yeah.
And that's
So right here,
We have-
this is the same as this, is the same as that.
Yeah. It's
It's
just,
just
That
a
usually-
horizontal view instead of from the top.
yeah.
And your position is always in the middle.
Yeah.
It's, okay?
So number 2 is like the middle child.
Yeah, well, this is,
Okay, number 2.
you'll see something similar, so like on the bottom of 430s on Garmin's, they have a little course deviation indicator built right into them, and it looks similar to this, except it's got just a little bar.
Yeah, kind of weird and shaded.
Okay.
Lines.
So you're tracking a VOR, alright? You fly to it, and we'll talk about the cone of confusion and the zone of ambiguity. You remember those? So what's the cone of confusion?
The cone of confusion is when you're close enough to it that it can't differentiate between the radials very well.
You can't. It has a tough time with differentiating between the radials. What it really has is a tough time knowing which side of the actual VOR it's on for just a second. All right, and usually that doesn't last very long, but you know it's going to happen. It happens every single time you fly over a VOR. So when you are flying towards the VOR and you're getting close and that needle's getting super sensitive, at some point, usually a couple miles before the VOR, you just accept the heading and keep flying straight until you get a solid reversal. And then continuing on, if you're just going in a straight line, it's usually pretty easy. Just continue on, and then your VOR should flip, to to from, and then you keep going on your heading. And if you've drifted off a little bit while you're in the cone of confusion, you fix it. And it's going to get sort of easier to fix as you keep going because the width of that radial gets just a little bit wider all the way out because it's like a big, gigantic piece of pizza pie, right? All right. The problem becomes, what if you get to the VOR and you're supposed to turn? What do?
The 6Ts.
Look at that! The 6T! The second the VOR makes a complete reversal, you turn, time, twist, throttle, top, and track. In that order. So you turn the plane to your expected new heading, you twist the
Set your timer.
Time.
you set thank you. So you turn, you start a timer, you twist the OBS to the new radial that you're supposed to be on, and it's going to be from, because it's going to be from, where do we put the radial? On top. From goes on top. Alright? So you set your new radial, if it's an HSI, you just turn it to the course you want. Turn to the course, and off you go. Alright? And when you come out of the zone of confusion, or the cone of confusion, it's cone of confusion, zone of ambiguity. That's FAA test speed. So the cone is a circle and it points all the way down to the ground. But when you come out of the cone of confusion, if you're a little bit off, you fix it. And I would even say when you're a little bit off, you fix it. If you're doing really, really good and you got everything kind of timed down pretty good, you may be right on track. Most of the time, you got to make a minor adjustment. Plus, you're dealing with the wind. Your wind correction is going to be different. Almost every single time. All right. If you were to fly straight through it, you'd have to then turn right, re-intercept the new course, go from there. All right, so flying from a VOR, I'm going to kind of blow through this because we've talked about it quite a bit. You fly to it, so you fly the selected course to and then from the VOR. If it is a straight line, you still do the 6 T's when you cross over the top of the VOR. Turn. Am I turning? No. All right. Time. Should I start a timer? Probably. Twist. Nothing to twist.
Throttle altitude change.
Throttle altitude?
Maybe.
Maybe.
An altitude change.
So yes, oftentimes that's a crossing point or something like that. All right. So throttle, talk, and track. Keep going.
It's so easy to like you do the first 2 or 3 T's and then you get distracted and forget the last 3 or 4. It happens all the time. Do all 6 every time, even if they're kind of no-ops.
It's a checklist, which is why I wrote it up like a checklist. All right.
I've seen a lot of people that have it right on their panel. They just make a little sticky and stick it up there.
There you go. So dual VOR. What's nice about having two VORs?
Step down fix.
What's that?
What?
Say that.
Step down fix.
Step down fix. It is a way to identify. So with a radio, all you know is what direction you are from the VOR. Okay. So far, we don't have any tools to tell us where we are on that line. All right. But if you have two VORs, you can do it with one VOR. It just means a whole lot of tuning and twisting. But you can get on one radio and then look for where that radio crosses the radio from another VOR, and it will tell you exactly where you are in space. Because two radios only cross in one place.
It's like a longitude and latitude, but
it's based off of VOR.
It's just yeah.
You are 100% correct. So, does anybody have a difficult time with this concept? This is one of those ones that if you don't get it, it really hurts your brain. Most people kind of get it intuitively. Yep. If I know what line I am on from this radio, and I know what line I'm on from this one, I know where my intersection is.
Two lines make a point.
There you go.
Sure.
All right.
So it's just a question. Instrument procedures that need step down fixes, they never actually require two VOR radios, right?
No, because you can do it with one.
You do want to switch back and forth and back and forth and back and forth a lot. It's just a lot of work.
It is an incredible amount of work, and you really have to be good at both tuning. Now, usually you can put them in flip-flop.
Yeah.
But then it's setting the OBS, and you better be on the right OBS, you know. So, and sometimes setting the OBS for the one you're not tracking gets a little wonky if you're not really thinking through it. Because, am I flying towards it or away from it? So like here, technically you are flying away from this VOR at this point.
And I can imagine it gets even worse when you gotta do holds over it.
Over the, yeah. So,
What if you're trying to find the radio that's right on the 90 intersection? Will that be a 2 or a from?
right on what?
If it's 90 degrees.
Oh, like straight up here?
If it's 90 degrees to the radio you're on, will that be a 2?
If you just dial in the radio, it'll come in. If you're going the wrong way, you'll know it pretty quick. But
So in this case, you would want a from indication from that top VOR. That's the one you're navigating away from. And the bottom VOR, you would want to see a from indication, whether you're to the left or to the right, to the west or the east of that bottom one. You'd want a from because that's the radio that you want to see that you're on.
yeah, the good news is that reverse sensing problem really doesn't become a big problem when you're with the identifying fix, because what you're waiting for is to see when you cross that line, and if it sweeps the wrong way, it's not going to ruin your day. It will confuse you though, because you'll feel like you're going.
So you just want to see it centered up. You don't really care which direction.
You want this one, yeah. You need them both centered, and this is kind of when I told you we're gonna at the very end of today we're going to talk about RMIs a little bit, just a little bit. When I tell you that your EHSI looks like an RMI sometimes because you can have two needles on it, but it's not really an RMI. It is a two-needle EHSI. The nice thing, though, is that you can then just set it, when you set your two VORs to two different VOR settings, they'll just come together and they'll cross at the right place, and that's when you're at the right spot. Which makes more sense when you see it than when I say it. All right. Flipping to reciprocal. This is all I want you to know is if you've got 360 on the top, the reciprocal is 180. It's just whatever's at the bottom. All right. And you can do this with your heading indicator. You can do it with your OBS, or you can do it with the wind side of your thing. The other thing is sometimes you're just looking for a 45 degree. So if you're on a bearing, just read what's 45 degrees over on your heading indicator, or what's 45 degrees to the right on your OBS. Don't do math. Just read it off of the cheat sheet that's hanging out in front of you. You got like 3 of them in your plane almost all the time. All right. The other one is, yes, If it's 180 degrees or less, you can add 200 and then subtract 20. If it's 180 degrees, 81 degrees or more, you can add 20 and then subtract 200. I say it in that order specifically so you never have a negative number. But the easier thing is to just take your E6B and dial it. Alright. VOR service volumes. This is one where I'm going to tell you, you can answer like 9 questions just by knowing that this is in the book that they give you. Alright? The VOR service volume. This diagram is off of page 46 in the KTS. The KTS. The trick to watch out for is very often they will say, what is the distance apart between maximum distance apart between two VORs to define an airway? What's the trick in that question?
Can I say that question again?
Okay, what is the maximum distance apart for two VORs to define an airway at a specific altitude? Now, I don't want you to give me an answer. I want you to tell me what the trick is in that question. That's going to screw you up.
It doesn't account for terrain.
Maximum distance apart.
Is there a maximum distance?
There is a maximum distance. Do you know what the trick is? Do you know what the trick is? Go for it. Let's see it.
Altitude. I can guess, but
Wait.
probably not.
Take a step.
I would guess that they change how much it sends out signals, like how far it sends out signals.
They have fixed service volumes.
I might be going down the wrong path though.
If a VOR is receivable out 40 miles from the station, how far could you have two VORs apart and still have reception the whole time? That's the trick.
The trick is they will always give you the option for just the service volume of 1. All right. So there are specifically questions about high altitude VORs have a service volume at altitude of 100 nautical miles. So what's the maximum distance you can have between two VORs on an airway? 200. But 100 will be an answer. All right. So take a second and listen and look. Practice questions will help you because you'll see which ones they word what way. But then, if you can't remember the service volumes, which typically it's 25 for a terminal VOR. Hang on, there's a whole chart. This is why it's confusing. So a terminal VOR has a 25 nautical mile distance. Low altitude VOR has a 40 nautical mile distance. And then the
Is this in the book?
yeah. And then the VOR high for different altitudes. So a VOR low, that's it. So at high altitude, you get all these other ranges. Okay? And if you look at that picture right there, so that picture is in the test material you get. And it tells you that you can have up to 130 nautical miles. They'll tell you at like 10,000 feet or 14,000 feet, 14,500 feet, it's 100 miles. Here, it's 130 miles for
So when we take the test, do we get this book?
you get that picture for sure. I literally pulled that picture out of the test book.
Gotcha.
Oh, is that your test supplement there? Yep. So, what I'm telling you is the only time you care about this in the real world is if you're doing off-route VOR navigation. So spending a ridiculous amount of brain power memorizing the complicated volume set for a high altitude. Do you disagree with me on this?
I do not disagree with you, no.
Okay, yeah, so I don't memorize it. I'm giving you the tool to say, if you get a VOR volume and distance question, go in your book, find the VOR volume diagram, and then work it out, because you are all smart enough to add. But the trick they will have is sometimes they will ask what the maximum range is that you can be from a VOR, and sometimes they'll ask what the maximum range distance could be between the two VORs.
Gotcha.
See? So,
Maximum distance between should be
double.
double.
double, but it's also based on altitude.
Do you think they would ask any question like between one of those like high altitude VORs and a low altitude VOR?
I don't remember seeing any questions like that in the bank at all. But to your point, if they did ask that, you can at least go and you can go, okay, I got a low and I got a high. Because like the only ones that are different at the same altitude, I think, Virtual, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the only ones that are different at the same altitude is that terminal VORs are always 25 and low altitudes are 40. But you can go from a low altitude to a terminal. Yeah. But when you go up in altitude, if it's at the same altitude, I think they have the same surface volume. It's just low altitudes don't go up as high. But don't do calculus on this. I'm just telling you. This diagram right here and a little bit of mental math, and you can work it out. All right. And this is the question that I said I thought I understood it, and then I came back and reread it. You are supposed to be able to tell if this is a low altitude, a high altitude, or a terminal VOR. But somehow I confused myself. But the little in parentheses where it says VL and then H, what I can't figure out is why they got the TT. The V. Where'd I put? Oh, there it is.
I think Rod said something about that in chat.
Yeah, well, you're supposed to be like this is a high altitude VOR. I don't know what the VL is or the VH.
You know, would that be part of the reason why they have some of the VORs drawn bigger and some of them smaller, like Pullman and Lewiston?
I don't know.
I
can spend 1,000 years researching that.
That one looked like it just depended on how much. In Lewiston looked like they depended on how much they had to write in the same space. You know, I was like.
It might have been. Sometimes they do chart adjustments.
On the previous slide, they had a VL.
So he says the.
Oh, there you go.
In this case, the first H represents the service volume for the VOR. The second SSV represents the for the second nav H component, which is DME.
Oh, okay.
So the El Toro VOR has two T's representing service volumes for the VOR and the DME.
Which are both terminal.
Yeah.
Okay. That was what I missed, was the DME is the second letter.
Gotcha.
All right. So you've got VOR low, VOR high, DME low, DME high. There you go. Okay. All this is to say again, the only time these service volumes are important is if you are trying to plot an off-route VOR to VOR course. Because you have to show that you have signal integrity across both. If you're on a VOR airway that has already been established, so in the real world, if you're going direct, we almost always use GPS nowadays. So, I hopefully have given you the tools to be able to answer the questions using all tools that are things you have available during the test. All right, reverse sensing. We've actually talked about this. The bottom line is if you are flying to the VOR and you have a from indication, your needles are going to swing the wrong way, and it's going to confuse the crap out of you. It is from a training perspective, when you're training to fly the aircraft or when you're looking to answer the questions in the test. I don't know that I've ever seen an actual reverse sensing question on the written test. The answer is always, always, always set your VOR properly so that you're getting a to indication if you're going to the thing and a from indication if you're going away from it. All right? The one grand exception is if you're flying the back course of a localizer. If you're flying the back course of a localizer, it's always reverse sensing unless your system has a reverse sensing switch. But the reverse sensing switch does not work for flying on a VOR. It's only for flying on a localizer because technically localizers only have one course. The back course is the reciprocal of that course, but that's not the actual course. Does that make? Electronically, it's not quite the same. All right. HSI and reverse sensing. Bottom line is, because of the way an HSI works, they don't reverse sense. If you dial the right course in, it spins around and points the right direction. And then the course deviation line is going to be the right way. They used to tell you, when they first came out with these, They were like, it's a moving map. They're like, just think of it like it's a map. Wherever the line is, fly to the line, you're good. Okay? It's a very, very busy picture for the, it doesn't really do reverse sensing. Time and distance. Oh, I forgot to. All right. Statistically speaking, you will probably not get a question on this, but there is a way, without any kind of distance measuring equipment or GPS, to get a rough estimate of how far you are away from the VOR. That's if you're flying on a radial, you turn 90 degrees, you fly to another select radial, and you time it. And then you do math. And I'm going to say it exactly that way because I don't remember the exact math. It's in the book. That would not be high priority study for me for any of the tests. Have you ever had an...
I've never had a question on that, no.
Okay, yeah, so...
It's not something they ask on the practical either.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's because VORs are not... It used to be something you were expected to do. Like you had to demonstrate timing out the distance, especially if you didn't have DME. That was a thing you could do. It's a neat trick to have in the back of your mind and to know that it exists. I'm telling you, unless you really, really, really want to make sure you've got 100% tightness on your, for the random question that I don't know is still on the test or not, I would not spend a lot of mental energy on this. On an oral, you might get asked, is there a way? And you could say, yes, you turn right, 90 degrees, you turn one way 90 degrees, you time it until you intercept a specific other radial, and then you do math. I don't know the formula off the top of my head, but I know where to get it. Does that make sense to you, Virtual?
Yeah.
Where do you get it?
Oh, what's that?
Where do you get it?
It's in Rod Machado's book. It's in the Instrument Flying Handbook.
So put Rod Machado's phone number in your phone and just text him in the middle of the thing. I'll get it, just 1 second.
I would die laughing.
Calm down.
Please, Ron, help me.
I think he's the kind of guy that would answer.
Totally.
I think he would.
Yeah, he's completely cool.
Yeah. Have you done it?
I think I get it
I've not done
He's
that,
always
but
on a joke too.
I went to one of his seminars and I was just on the front seat. So he says to me, can you, when there's like 7 minutes left to go, can you just stick your hand up so I know there's 7 minutes left for me to finish on my presentation? Like, yeah, cool, I got it, set a timer and everything. At 7 minutes and 12 seconds, he started transitioning into his end of thing. He had it timed perfect. He didn't need me. Wow. But
Did you still raise your hand?
no, that was clear. He was wrapping up. I'm like, good job, man. He had that thing wired.
I saw him at Oshkosh one year. And he's just as cheesy. Every bit. Okay, so tracking a VOR course. The big thing is you don't have like all the help from a GPS. So you have to identify the effect of the wind, re-intercept the course, apply a wind correction, and then you're going to adjust. You're never going to get it right the first time. If you do, the world is coming to an end, and so you should put your affairs in order. You know, it's the end of times. Your heading will not likely match the radial or the course that you specifically are trying to fly, because you are always in moving air. Any disagreement with?
Nope, you're gonna have a wind correction angle.
And nobody looks at their compass correction card anyway. So,
Well, there you go.
so
the compass is so hard to read.
But I'm saying, so how often do you really get your DG exactly right to begin with?
No, you're just close.
Yeah, so even your DG isn't really.
Now, if you have an HSI that's slaved, and it's probably pretty damn close. And,
Those are sweet.
yeah. So okay. So this is what are the 6 C's?
Turn, time, twist, throttle, talk, and track.
Perfect. There we go. So I told you I put this slide in here twice because I think that this is for the flying aspect of this. This is something you want to get nailed down, because if you can turn this into instinct, you will keep yourself from getting behind the plane. It'll help you to just move forward.
Well, and you don't want to just pass the written exam or the oral exam. You want to be good pilots.
Yeah. So my number one focus here is the written test. My number two is the oral. And then I'm not teaching you how to fly in here, but I am trying to help it so that when you're with us working on your flying, we spend more time flying and not a bunch of time reviewing. Does that make sense? So yeah. But that's also why, like I sit here and tell you that don't waste time studying something you're never ever going to use if you can find the answer in your book. Just be aware of it, and you'll be all right. All right, chasing the needle. Why would the needle deflection speed up as you get closer to the VOR? What do you think?
I'm not sure. Deflection would speed up?
So why would the needle swing more when you get...
I don't know.
Okay, good. Fair enough.
Well, it's basically because of geometry, because the every radial is, we said, about 10 degrees wide.
Mm-hmm.
But as you get closer, that 10 degrees gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
The lateral displacement changes. If you are 60 miles from the VOR and you are 1 dot of deflection off, so 2 degrees, how far are you from the course you want to be on? It was in the book. That's funny. Where did I put it? Nope. I was going to make sure that my memory was right.
I think at 60 miles, 1 degree is 1 mile. So 1 dot is 2 degrees, which makes 1 dot 2 miles.
So at 60 miles, for every dot, you are 2 miles off course. Which, how wide is a VOR Victor Airway? 4 miles.
4 miles? Yeah.
Okay, is it 4 miles either side, or is it 4 miles total?
I think it's 4 miles total.
4 miles total.
Okay, so that 2 miles, that's... there you
So
go.
at 1 dot of deflection at 60 miles, you are almost off the airway. I'm going to double check that because it might actually be 4 each side.
Yeah, let me
You
look
can
that
double
up.
check it for Thank you.
Alright, everyone pulls out Google, of course.
So, well, that's what we're here for, is to support each other. But the bottom line is 60 miles, 2 dots. And you'll notice, I don't know if you guys picked up on this, I don't always trust my memory, even though I just researched this crap. I went back to check my note. 1 dot is 2 degrees, is 2 miles. It's 1 degrees at 1 mile for every degree at 60 nautical miles.
So Victor Airway is 4 nautical miles on either side.
Either side.
So it is
Yep.
8 nautical miles total.
So,
And
2 dots of deflection, if you're half deflected, you're off the course. At 60 miles. Alright?
Aerobatics are prohibited within 4 nautical miles of a Victor Airway, right? Isn't that one of the restrictions on aerobatics?
I believe it's from the center line.
So it's 4 miles from the center line of the Victor Airway. So that's,
You can't be
That
on the
makes it-
Victor Airway.
So that means it's 8 miles wide. technically.
Yes,
Okay.
that's why I said I was wrong. We were clarifying coming back.
So basically, if you're at 60 miles and 2 dots deflection, you could look over and have somebody doing.
Yeah, flip an Immelman right
Yeah,
next to you.
PWC upside
or a big
down.
mountain face right there, yeah.
I mean,
So-
already-
Okay, so if at 60 miles, a 1 dot deflection gives you 2 miles, at 30 miles, what does a 1 dot deflection give you?
Half a mile.
Hmm?
Half a mile? 1 mile. It's half, so it's not.
1 mile.
1 dot, yeah.
It's 1 dot. You're gonna read dot deflections more than anything else, and really, you don't really do that calculus. You don't sit there spending time and brain power on that. I am slightly right of course, get back on course.
So if you're less than 120 miles away and less than 2 dots, you know you're in the safe zone. Right? Hypothetically, you should be inside that safe zone. if you're less than 120 miles and less than 2 dots.
Less than 60. Oh, no, you're right.
It's actual date.
120. Except for your VOR is not going to be receivable at 120.
Right, so it's an actual
So, yeah, let's not overcomplicate it.
No,
The real thing is, if you're deflected, get back on the course. Center your needle. All right? So, all right. Get back to where we were. So chasing the needle. Okay, I had an image I meant to throw in here, and I just apparently forgot to do it. So the zone of the cone of confusion we talked about. What's the zone of ambiguity? Does anybody know?
Isn't that right over the top where it doesn't come to or from?
So it's if you don't cross directly over the VOR.
Right over the top is cone of confusion. It's a cone that goes from the ground up.
It's the line that's perpendicular to your radio.
So this is my VOR.
Oh my God, where's the cone of confusion?
Okay, so your cone of confusion looks something like this from the top, right? Centered on here. Now, if I'm supposed to be flying to the VOR, but for some reason I fly over here. So,
But your corpse is still down through the middle.
yeah, this was my course.
You're still going to get that.
Bottom line is you are way past full deflection at this point, but right here, your CDI needle doesn't know which way you are past. All right, it knows you are full deflection. So it may windshield wiper on you. Sometimes it just peg to one side and then also flip to the other side. Sometimes your to from indicator will go into a flag mode for a second or two. It just
The thing, in other words, it sort of winks out at you for a minute.
yeah, but because it's ambiguous. It's not clear where it is because of how everything is set up. All right? You just need to know you have a cone of confusion and a zone of ambiguity. And the zone of ambiguity is if you don't pass over the top. Now, in theory, you can be in the zone of confusion and the cone of confusion and the zone of ambiguity at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, and what it actually, whether it windshield wipers or whether the, if you have an HSI, sometimes they'll flip over. It all has to do with a combination of what kind of radio you have, what kind of CDI you have, and the VOR itself, like terrain and other interference. Am I making sense? And Virtual's gone into research mode. Did I say something that
I'm pretty sure in the zone of ambiguity, doesn't your CDI stay to the same side? Because when you're south of it, it would be deflected. And when you're north of it, it would still be deflected the same way. I thought
when you go through it, depending on your radio, they will sometimes swing wildly like a windshield wiper for just a second. I also know HSIs will sometimes flip over. But the bottom line is, you don't know where you are. You are so far off course, you don't know where you are.
So what happens if you do that?
Correct.
You cross the east to west and the north to south directions at the same time. And you're off center. Then it'll really go crazy.
I have no idea what you are even. I don't think what you're saying is even physically possible.
Yeah, okay, yeah. It would really go nuts for you.
Okay, we've gone down a weird road. The bottom line for the test is you need to know cone of confusion and zone of ambiguity. So, alright. VOR checks. Why do we have to do VOR checks?
To make sure the gear's not broken.
To make sure that the VOR is working functionally. How often do we have to do that?
15 minutes.
That would be aggressive.
Every 30 days. Per
It's a-
171.
Yep, from 91171.
Oh, you mean the big checks.
Maybe that's
like
like
checking
reset
your
the-
magnetic compass.
Yeah, good.
What's that?
I thought it was.
You're thinking about heading indicator.
That's a
Yeah, that's right. Both went.
No, so your VOR, so every 30 days, and this is something a pilot does, you check the VOR to make sure that it is accurate. All right? It is only required for IFR flight. You do not have to do a VOR check for VFR flight. Because what is our primary mode of navigation for VFR flight? Pilot is your dead reckoning is the technical book answer, but yes, it's looking outside the airplane. VORs are an aid to navigation in VFR flight. In IFR flight, if you are going to use your VOR as a primary mode of navigation, you must have done a VOR check within 30 days, and it must be in a log. And this is interesting. Not the logs for the plane. It has to be logged on something in the airplane. You have to have it with you. You can literally be a 3x5 card.
Can be a sticky note.
Yep.
I was just about to say that.
It can be a sticky note. But you have to have it in the plane, and it has to have the signature of the person that did the check, the place they did the check. We're going to talk about where you do your checks in a minute. The error, and the date. And to remember that, it's SPED, S-P-E-D, signature, place, error, date.
Don't you have to put whether or not it was a ground check or an air check?
We'll look in the reg. I don't think you actually have to write that. You just have to write what the error was. Oh, because the place. The place
Okay, yeah.
answers that question. Took me a second. Okay. So, yeah, signature, place, error, and date. Multiple methods. Now, one that they don't bring up very often, but you can actually have it done in an avionics shop. They can bench check. That's super expensive. And only should probably be done if it's failed a different test. Alright. A VOT. What's a VOT?
VOR test.
It's a VOR test facility. It's like a little mini VOR, but all 360 degrees of the radials broadcast 360. They all broadcast exactly the same. So you should get now I always get this one backwards, 360.
Oh, I said 360 from.
360 from 182, I believe. Bottom line is it should center on 360. Okay?
I'm gonna have to look that up. I most
Thank you.
definitely guessed that.
Actually, it would be 360.
What's that?
It'd be 360 from and to, right?
No, it's because one's the radial, one's the heading.
So it doesn't raise.
Yeah, so it's all 360 radial, so 360. She's looking it up because I say it wrong. What I know is I have never actually used a VOT because so few airports have them. Phelps Field has either a VOT or a VOR check. It's in the, if you pull up Phelps Field on iPad, start supplement. Thank you. All right. If you use a VOT signal, you have to be plus or minus 4 degrees. What did we come up with? Is it 362 or from?
360 from.
From?
Got the answer before.
Did you find it in the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so 360 from, because it is the 360 radial. But that makes sense. And then it should also center on 182. 18022.
Also.
So now you can have a VOR checkpoint, and this is a specific spot on the ground or in the air. It'll be listed in the chart supplement. If you do it on the ground, it'll literally have a spot painted and marked. You have to taxi the plane onto that spot. Now, does it matter which direction the plane is pointed? No, because all you're doing is seeing if you're on a specific radial. And in the chart supplement, it will tell you what radial should center as the from and the to. But it's just using an existing VOR that you happen to be able to read on the ground. And so, Bob from maintenance went out and painted a mark on the ground to say this is where you have to put the plane. All right? If you're doing it on the ground, plus or minus 4. The other way you can do it is they will define, usually it's defined on an airway towards a VOR, and it's over something that you can see. All right? So that you can just fly over the top of it. There will be altitude restrictions. It has to be done above a certain altitude. Can't be done above another altitude. You got to be at the right altitude, but you fly in. If you're flying in the air, using one radio and dialing it in, plus or minus 6 from whatever the answer is they tell you in the chart supplement. Alright? Which, I don't know why I wrote that twice. Okay, so airborne VOR check on an airway. You can have both charted and non-charted. The non-charted
That's your homemade.
is homemade. So you can make up your own VOR checkpoint. What I owe you is I got conflicting information and I need to go find a primary source. One place said it had to be on a VOR airway. That is not how I remember the homemade one. What I remember the homemade one being is that it has to be a specific distance from, no less than a specific distance from the VOR. And it has to be over a prominent point on the ground. So, for right now, we're just going to go with, you are allowed to make up your own VOR checkpoint, but there are rules, and we have to find out what those rules are. That's fair enough?
Where's our homemade,
Did you want an example? So
There you go.
for the VOT, here's the chart supplement for Phelps Field, and it's just right above radio aids to navigation VOR test facility 114.0.
So what is that one going to radiate?
360.
360. It is a VOT. If it's a test, they're all the same. Okay? If you have a ground checkpoint, I don't know what other airports around here have ground checkpoints. You should know how to look that up. If you have ForeFlight, you can go to, so was that Geiger or Phelps?
That was Phelps.
That's Phelps.
That was KSFF, whichever one.
Yeah, that's Phelps Field. So KSFF, if you know how to pull up Phelps Field, and then if you go down in the information portion, is that how you got there?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Yep. You go down and it'll say is it AFD? Is it still labeled AFD?
It's still labeled
Still
AFD.
labeled AFD.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so here's something to know. The airport facility directory is now officially referred to as the chart supplement. But people still call it the AFD. So just know that's the little green book that you got. Okay, so Charles, dual VOR check. If you have two different VOR radios in your aircraft, they can share the same antenna. That is fine. You tune them, you center a VOR. You can do this anywhere. You just tune in a VOR, identify the VOR, center both of them at the same time, and they have to read within plus or minus 4 of each other. So they have to be within 4 degrees. Okay? You do it while you're flying.
So would you fly directly toward, you want to fly directly towards one of them?
Yeah,
Just to make it easier to dial in.
they'll stay steady longer if you just are flying in a straight line towards the VOR.
You need one VOR.
Strictly speaking, it doesn't. You just one VOR. It's one VOR. You have to have 2 radios.
These two both.
You tune them both, and then you see if they read the same thing. And if but they can only be 4 degrees different. It's not really plus or minus 4, even though that's how we phrase it. They can only be 4 degrees different. If they're within 4 degrees of each other, both radios are considered good. Okay? Notice, with the exception of the dual VOR, if you do it in the air, it's plus or minus 6 degrees. If you do it on the ground, it's plus or minus 4. That will help you studying for the test.
Except for the VOT, right? Because that's in the air.
No, the VOT signals are done on the ground.
They're on the ground.
I think I have an answer for your homemade one.
Okay, read it to us.
So for part 91.171, it goes through all the various ones we did, and then it says if neither a test signal, so this is part 91.171, paragraph B, section 3. If neither a test signal nor a designated checkpoint on the surface is available, use an airborne checkpoint designated by the administrator or outside the United States by an appropriate authority. The maximum permissible bearing area is plus or minus 6 degrees. Or If no check signal point is available while in flight, select a VOR radial that lies along the center line of an established VOR airway. Select a prominent ground point along the selected radial, preferably more than 20 nautical miles from the VOR ground facility, and maneuver the aircraft directly over the point at a reasonable altitude. And note the VOR bearing indicated by the receiver when the ground point, the maximum permissible variation between the published radial and indicated bearing is 6 degrees.
We're good. It has to be on an airway, preferably more than 20 nautical miles from the VOR. If you make it up on your own. And it has to be over a prominent landmark on the ground. All right, so this is kind of what it looks like in the chart supplement. So those are ground VOTs. I have never seen an airborne VOT, but now you've got me curious. Somebody mentioned gives it plus or minus 6 if you're in the air. I'd have to look. I don't think it is, but
It shouldn't be, because the VOT is only emitting one radio. It doesn't matter where you are from it only emits one radio. So if you're airborne, why would it have more than 40?
I don't know, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So because I don't know, I'll have to look it up. And I'm not. We're kind of going behind, so I'm going to speed up. DME. You will likely never see an airplane with a functioning DME anymore. They're out there. They're pretty rare now. What does DME actually measure?
The distance from it to the plane. Which is
From the DME, the straight line slant range. Okay, and that's what's important. Why is it important that it's slant range?
because of the Pythagoreans.
Because of the Pythagoreans?
Yeah.
Excellent answer.
Very good. Yeah, so,
There's not snakes.
because for every 6,000 feet you're up in the air, when you go to the top of it, that's a mile away. When you're straight up. So, at a distance, it's pretty accurate. As you get closer, the error increases for what your actual distance is from that. The thing to bear in mind is all of those elongated D's that you see how they show slant DME distance, so an elongated D with a number written inside it. Those distances are the actual slant range distance, and not the distance across the ground. This becomes a problem if you try to compare them using GPS distances or distances that you measure on a chart, because again, your altitude affects it. Why can we use GPS in lieu of DME though?
Is close enough.
Actually, yes but no. When you're using DME in lieu of GPS, you will notice that every one of those DME locations has a 5-letter code that is a GPS waypoint code. The GPS waypoint is in the right place. They don't measure it straight line, they put it where the DME would be. So your GPS is not measuring distance across the ground. It's just going to a waypoint that was defined to be at the exact same place that would have been if you were using a DME. Also, there's a little fudge factor in DME, because if you're at different altitudes, your DME range swings an arc. So if you happen to be lower than somebody else, you are further away than somebody else with the same DME. My geometry right?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, but that error is all built into it. All right, but when you're using DME for navigation, the way we're doing business, for a GPS in lieu of DME, that GPS point is a very precise spot, and it's the exact center of the arc. Okay. Slant range. It's the hypotenuse. It is not the 10 nautical miles on the bottom. Slant range distance is going to be 10 point something miles. All right. Weird exception to that when you're flying a DME arc and you're using GPS in lieu of the DME, it's actually measuring the straight line distance to where the DME would be. You're still within the protected zone. All right, 3 different ways of determining a position with DME equipment. Okay. You will never ever do this, but it's just a curious thing coming back to your head. You can be on the line and measure DME distance, and that gives you a specific spot. I am on the 360 radial 200 knots, or 200 miles away. You can use one DME and a different VOR, and where that DME line crosses is a specific point in place. I have never, ever, ever seen somebody use that as a useful means of measurement. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's a pain because you actually have to tune your DME to a different radio than your VOR is tuned to. And then the last one is, if you have 2 DMEs, I don't know, or you can switch real fast, there are 2 points in space that are the same distance from both DMEs. Okay? This is more trivia than anything else.
I've used A quite a bit, right? Knowing
is
going from the same VOR DME and getting a radial and a distance, super useful, very helpful. My airplane has a working DME still. I love it. I keep killing it now that I named it George. But yeah, B and C, like for B or C, you have to know close enough to where you are to figure out which of those 2 points it might be. So if you're really lost, it's not going to help you.
Okay. Yeah. So DME arc. You will fly a DME arc at some point in your training. It's just the way it is. Your instructor is going to explain it to you a lot because it's one of those things that's like trying to explain to somebody how to play a piano for the first time. Except it takes a lot less effort to actually make it work. And then once you figure it out, it's kind of like riding a bicycle. You're like, okay, so you're going to learn this whole thing about turn 10, twist 10. And I don't use turn 10, twist 10. I use half deflection, half deflection. You twist the OBS until you have half a deflection. Then you fly, you cross through, you let it go half a deflection, and you turn it until you got a half a deflection again, which is turn 10, twist 10. It's just a variant. This is what a DME arc looks like on a chart. We haven't taught charts yet. But the bottom line is your course is a big curve, and it helps to keep you from having to do weird turns and weird things to get online. All right, turn 10, twist 10, DME arcs made easy. I have not done...
Hi, it's Dan with Flight Insight, and we're looking at the DME arc here.
I don't know if we're going to get audio on this.
Approach or departure procedures where procedure turns aren't used like is or near obstructions. If you get a DME arc, it's just the FAA's way of telling you they want you to stay a constant distance
I don't know why we're not getting audio.
away from the station until you reach the next step of the procedure. Using your heading indicator, a VOR receiver, and of course a DME, you'll be able to tell where you are on the arc and when
you just put it in park. How many G's was that?
More than you'd like to know.
One to enter and one to leave.
The arc.
Then a series of small 10-degree turns to stay on the
arc at a constant distance from the station.
Okay, this is not going to work.
Let's look at the VOR approach to runway 31 in Atlantic City. You see the 2 arcs to the north and south of the approach course and the big note saying DME is required. Let's focus in on the southern arc, which takes us just along the coastline, clear of all those casino high-rises on the boardwalk. As always, we'll rebuild this approach on our whiteboard, starting with the VOR station itself, located right on the field, and then move the procedure over to the left for now. We can get set up for the arc by flying outbound from the station on the 174 radial. The DME arc starts 11 nautical miles from the station at a point identified as Avalo. It's noted by the triangle and the number 11.
Inside that elongated D for DME. From Avalo, we'll arc to the north and east, staying 11 miles away from the Atlantic City VOR the whole time, until we reach the inbound course for the approach of 302 heading. Just note that this isn't the 302 radial, but the reciprocal of that. It's the 122 radial. In any case, though, we're flying the 302 heading that'll align us with runway 31. Let's get a closer look at the arc. From the time we depart Avalo, we'll be making heading changes to the left in order to stay 11 miles from the station. Our DME receiver, or your distance measured on your GPS, will help us confirm that we're staying on the arc. It's all too easy to veer away from the arc by, for example, not turning enough so the aircraft drifts further away from the station as the DME shows. So we need some way to tell us when to turn. This is where the VOR receiver comes in. We can identify a series of radials from the station that will tell us exactly where we are on the arc. So just like Avalo is on the 174 radial, we can mark other positions on, say, every 10th radial from there. So like the 164, 154, 144 radial, and so on. Then what we can do is, instead of thinking of the arc as one continuous left turn, we can split it up into segments, each with a 10-degree turn at a time, starting at the radials we identified. So we turn the arc from a perfect circle into a portion of a sort of 36-sided polygon. Now we'll get set up by intercepting the 174 radial outbound. We've got 174 selected on the VOR and are flying an intercept heading of about 145 degrees. When the needle centers, we'll turn to the outbound course of 174, and we know we're approaching Avalo when the DME gets closer to 11. From Avalo, we'll make a 90-degree turn to start the arc. The arc starts and ends with 90-degree turns, but you don't have to do the math. Pilots should never do hard math. Even smart pilots lose about 30 IQ points in the cockpit. Just too much going on. To figure out what a 90-degree left turn is, just look at the left red arrow on the heading indicator, which would be 84 degrees, and fly that. Now we're ready to start flying the arc, but we want to know when it's time for the next left turn. We'll want to turn again when we cross the next radial 10 degrees away, so we'll twist 10 degrees in the VOR, sending the needle to the left. Which way do we twist? Well, we're arcing with turns to the left, so the numbers decrease, just like in any left turn. If we were arcing right, we'd increase the radials. Now we'll fly our heading until we cross that next radial as indicated by the needle coming to the center. When that happens, we'll turn 10 degrees left and twist 10 degrees left, continuing to fly on that new heading. Once the needle centers again, it's another round of turn 10, twist 10, and flying the next segment. If all goes well, our DME will show that we're staying 11 miles from the station. On the check ride, you'll be asked to maintain the arc within 1 mile, and turn 10, twist 10 can help you make the turns at the right times to stay close. Keep an eye on what radial we're on. Remember, our inbound course is 302, so we'll want to enter the approach segment when 302 is on the bottom of the VOR receiver. Again, it's not the 302 radial we're flying, it's its reciprocal. Now it's time for the second 90-degree turn to exit the arc and enter the final approach course. We'll turn inbound and then twist the VOR so the inbound course is now on top. Notice the flag flips from front to 2, and from there we fly inbound like we would on any VOR approach, noticing the DME distance getting smaller as we approach.
Okay. That was better than me trying to explain that.
Some pretty good visual aids.
Yeah. Like that one. All right. So, alright, I throw this up here because this is the picture of the book. The YouTube video was much easier to understand. And it's flying a DME arc is harder to explain than it is to do. But doing it takes practice.
It took me like 20 minutes staring at this and finally I drew it out before I actually figured it out.
There you go. Okay. So using the RMI. So again, it's another one of those, you're not going to see an RMI, but you might see a question about an RMI. The RMI, the needle just points to the station all the time, kind of like an NDB. And so you have to do this weird convoluted math if you want to figure out actual courses and reciprocals, which is hard. But for flying the arc, as long as you keep the same DME and you keep the RMI needle pointing to the proper side of the plane, either if you're doing the left arc, it points off to the left wing, right? So you just keep it pointing at the left wing and periodically make a little 5 or 10 degree turn, and it will stay off to the left wing. And just make sure if you're getting further out, you turn closer towards it. If you're getting closer to the DME, you make a shallower turn, or you just stay straight for a little while. You'll catch back up to the arc. Definitely look at this. There are a couple of potential written questions still, but do not spend a great deal of gray matter on this. VOR and the ILS. Yeah. Ended up way longer than I was expecting. All right, VOR and the ILS. Same radio. Localizer is usually located on the field. Usually. And is usually aligned with the runway. Localizer only has one true radial with an associated back course. The ILS also has a glide slope, which the glide slope is basically a radial turned 90 degrees on its edge. Okay? Localizer compared to a VOR, you got, there's your 20 degree VOR course width, 10 degrees left or right.
Okay.
But elsewhere, it actually says it's only 10 degrees. So, I will double check why I have two different widths. This is out of the book, so stick with 20.
Yeah.
I have never been asked that on it as a test question, just so you know.
I don't plan on being asked it as a test question. It's more thinking for like navigation if I'm doing something stupid like trying to use two VORs to triangulate my position.
Okay, yeah. Come on. Hopefully what you're getting is the center of the VOR. Okay, but so a normal localizer is 6 degrees wide. Some are only 3 degrees wide. Depends on how wide the runway is and where the localizer is placed. Because the goal is to make it so that when you cross the threshold, there's a certain width. It's 700 and some feet.
I think it's just 700.
Is it just 700?
I think it's what it says in here.
Okay. See, you guys remember better than I do. ILS approach chart, just real quick. We're going to do charts later. But you've got briefing material up here, including all the frequencies and landing elevations. This is a top-down view. And this is what it looks like from the side. And then there's always an airport diagram on it. So, this is out of our book, Figure 38. You leaving us?
Yeah, I'm out. I'll see you later.
Alright. Notice, this picture with all kinds of information is on page 47 of the knowledge testing supplement. Yep, 700 feet. Long runway, 3 degrees. Short runway, 6 degrees. Also that you end up with 700 feet in width. All right, the back course is going to be reverse sensing. Sometimes they have approaches that use the back course. If you're on a back course approach, the glide slope is void. Do not pay attention to a glide slope on a back course. So why would we use a back course? Because the wind is going the wrong way for you and it allows you a straight in landing. All right. Some aircraft have a back course switch. On here it's that little BC. I've seen it in an aircraft recently. Do we have it in one of our planes? A back course switch?
Does that simulator in there?
I think so. I don't remember where I saw it, but I've seen it in a plane recently. It was just a little toggle switch, literally right below the CDI. Again, the back course switch only applies to back courses on ILSs. All right, glide slope. In the Omni, the glide slope is either another little windshield wiper like this that wipes up and down instead of left or right. It can also be a bar that goes up and down. Generally, if you have the type of VOR that has a bar that moves this way, you'll have a bar that moves this way if you have a glide slope. And then in HSI style displays, it's usually two little triangles that move up and down the side. And that's what you'll see in most EHSIs. Oftentimes they're green, little triangles. They won't be there on an EHSI if you don't have a glide slope. And they will be like up out of the way on other OBS, on other Omnis if you don't have a glide slope. And there's usually a flag that says the glide slope's not on.
So if you're on a back course, will that glide slope still be there? Just don't.
It shouldn't, but sometimes they will show up. If you are on a back course, you are guaranteed that glide slope is a false glide slope. All right? So it'll only show up on a back course through weird reflection or some sort of building in the way. Craziness. All right, glide slope indicators. The glide slope, if it's above your little donut, you're below the glide slope. So you should hold your altitude and wait till you come into it. And that is the proper way to intercept a glide slope. You should always come into a glide slope from the bottom. Why do we not come in from the top? Anybody know?
Because you're descending very quickly if you get it that way.
So if you are too high, the glide slope, there's a true glide slope, and then there's like some ambiguity space, and then there'll be a false glide slope that'll be much steeper than the proper glide slope. It has to do with harmonic resonances and wavelength interference and math, but you can have up to 2 or 3 false glide slopes depending on the installation. The trick is the bottom one is the right one, and if you come into it from the bottom, you'll get the one that comes in at the lowest angle. And that's the one that's been surveyed. Otherwise, what you end up with is too fast a descent rate, too steep an angle. All right. Let's see.
But if you were on one of those,
it would take you to the same spot.
I mean, it might be steeper, some, but it'd still be doable. But
no.
Not doable? Okay.
So much steeper that you would break the airplane.
I got you. So much past it. It's not.
Yeah. It's like the difference between coming in like this and coming in like this.
Okay. It's not like
virtual might be able to do it in a helicopter. So, all right.
Normal approach for us.
So,
you can do that.
Where'd my?
It only once.
Well, you can do most everything, but only once.
Exactly.
Well, you generally don't want to be doing an instrument approach like full slip,
Yeah.
down the localizer.
Yeah, if you have to get an 800 foot per minute descent to stay on the localizer, you're wrong. All right.
Yeah. Red alert.
All right. So, I need this thing to
do a Navy landing.
Here's a question for you.
Okay, I'm listening.
What do you do if you're somewhere, say that you're to go missed approach, you've got to go.
Oh crap! Keep going.
Quite a ways out, and you accidentally get on that higher one. You realize you're on it, but you're already past your missed approach threshold. What do you do?
You go missed. You're gonna do a missed approach and go around.
But even if you're already past where you can do a missed approach,
you're still over the airport. You will go missed. If you are not on the proper glide slope, you go missed. All right. All right.
Oh yes, technology.
So.
It's beautiful.
Glide slope. All right, so outer marker, middle marker. There's actually technically an inner marker, but you'll never deal with an inner marker. They're just little radios that broadcast straight up. They make a little like oval shape, and they tell you where you are on the glide slope. You will only see them on an ILS, instrument landing system. Jesus. All right. Your glide slope transmitter is usually just off to the side of the runway, partway down the runway. Big thing to note is the glide path brings you down to the 1,000 foot markers. That's where it's trying to put you down. Not at the end of the runway. Your touchdown zone is in the first 3,000 feet of a runway. The touchdown zone identifier is the big 1,000 foot markers. I call them the refrigerators. But so you land on the refrigerators. That is the proper way to come down. All right, your antennas are on the back, typically of your tail. Oftentimes they look like gigantic cat whiskers. It is not necessarily true that your glide slope is in that same array, because the glide slope antennas are super short, they're about that long, and your VOR antennas are about that long. So,
Those radios you were talking about a minute ago. What does that look like in the cockpit when you go over one?
What radio?
The one that broadcasts.
Oh, the marker. Oh,
Light up.
I was expecting. Hang on. Here we go. They're very often 3 little colored lights on your
That's Bravo Tango has those.
on your commo.
So does 6-9, right?
Yeah. So built into this is what I said. You find weird places that there's just a radio built in your communications control panel. If you've got 3 little lights, a blue one, an orange one, and a white one, OMI, that's outer, middle, inner. There will also very often be like this little marker switch, and this is the marker low and high setting. You've got a couple of settings. It will beep Morse code as you go over it. It's not actually Morse code technically, it's like a specific number of short and long dashes. The one, I don't remember off the top of my head, one does short dashes, one does dashes, one does dots, and then another one does dots and dashes. I think the inner is dot dash. But it also turns on a light on your pen. And you can change it from low to high sensitivity. If it's on high sensitivity, it comes on earlier and stays on longer. If you turn it to low sensitivity, you have a more precise location. And let's see, the middle marker is approximately 200 feet above the touchdown zone, which interestingly usually correlates with the missed approach point on an ILS. You're 200 feet above, your middle marker goes off, you should either see or leave. Right. Outer marker beacon is 4 to 7 miles. It's not nearly as precise. It will always be on the glide slope and it will be indicated on the approach chart. Nowadays, it usually also has a co-located GPS fix. So it's just it's not a step down fix technically because you're flying on a glide slope, but it is just a reference to where you are. All right. And compass locator. Oh, a compass locator is a marker beacon that also acts as an NDB. They're being phased out. But I think there is one question that might show up on your test that just asks what a compass locator is.
Marker beacon that also functions as a
Non-directional beacon. All right, inside the inner marker. Oh, I just didn't remove that. All right, decision altitude. All right, approach lighting systems. For tonight, all you need to know is there's a bunch of different lighting systems, and they look different. There are little pictures that depict what they should look like. Those little pictures end up on your approach plate. This was in this chapter, so I threw it on here right now. We will talk about it more when we talk about approach plates. You want to know what kind of lights you expect to see. All right? You also need to know that when you reach your decision altitude or your MDA, you have to see something on the runway side of the lights, in addition to the lead-in lights, to continue your approach beyond 100 feet AGM. That's kind of a big thing.
So you're doing it within 100 feet of the runway without being able to see it.
The runway. You can only go down to MDA or DA, and then if you see this light out here, you can continue down to 100 feet. Your MDA might be 600 feet, it might be 400 feet. Very often on an ILS, it's 200 feet. These lighting systems are generally so all the ones on the left are associated with ILS. If they don't have an ILS on that runway, you will not have this many lights. All right? This is for non-precision instrument lighting, but with modern GPS approaches, oftentimes all you have is runway end identifier lights or runway end markers. So,
because we can fly like a GPS approach into here.
Yeah. Yes, and you don't have all those lights. It's actually a great example. We just have lights at the end of the runway, right?
There's a big cliff over there. Would we be able to put the lights?
Yeah. There'd be some tall towers.
They're hovering.
So yeah, you could just have runway end. All right.
Just chilling out there.
You click the mic and then
So
then they
I'm too low.
Launch the climb.
Odals are very, very simple lights. They're all white, but they flash in sequence. All right. So, and this is a little bit of potpourri, if you will, at the end here. So, simplified directional facility may or may not be aligned with the runway, maybe 6 or 12, and it has a 3-letter identifier. Will not have an I. An SDF, those are all being phased out. You could stumble across one for a little while longer. It's like a localizer, but it's not as narrow necessarily. It's very often not exactly aligned with the runway, and it's all because there are obstacles or other things that cause a problem with using a regular localizer. So it's a workaround. They usually have much higher approach minimums than than localizers. All right.
Again, said obstacles.
What's that?
Again, said obstacles.
Because you have obstacles in the way. And it ends up with, oftentimes you'll have like a weird descent that's a little steeper than normal. This SDF is 6 or 12 normally. So, like I said, they can be 6 degrees just like a localizer. But if they are 6 degrees, they're probably not aligned with the runway. And then localizer type directional aid. This is when you use somebody else's localizer to do business at your airport. So if you've got 2 airports that are pretty close together, one of them has a localizer, the other airport may just not buy a localizer, and then they'll use that signal. It is important to know that you're coming down on a LDA, because if you keep following that thing, you're going to end up at the wrong airport, not just the wrong place. Okay? LDAs are almost always circling only minimums, but not always. If it just happens to be that localizer goes down the runway and is within 30 degrees, they can use it for straight in minimum. Okay. There you go. Burbank, and then they've got Van Nuys has a runway that. So if you think about this, at Van Nuys, you come in, you're flying down Burbank's localizer, and then you're going to have to circle either left or right to land. If you kept going straight, you'd be landing at Burbank. And they might be upset with you because you're not supposed to be there. All right.
Burbank's a class Charlie, too. And
Yeah.
it's been nice the Deltas. So you really don't want to do that.
There you go. All right, area navigation. I want to hit this piece real quick. All right. There is a form of RNAV that was based off of VORs. It was VOR DME. So you remember how you can calculate your exact position in space, radial, and the distance from the VOR, right? They made a thing, a box, a computer that was in your plane, where you could literally say, okay, I want to fly to a point that is on this radial, this far from this VOR, and it would make that point, and then it treated that point like it was a fake VOR. I bring all of this up because I think there was one question that used to be on the test about it. But what's important is that you have to understand that RNAV does not equal GPS. GPS is one subset of RNAV. It's also called GNSS, and I knew what that stood for 2 minutes ago, and now I forgot.
Global Navigation Satellite System.
Thank you very much. So GPS operates on the GNSS. GPS, yeah, you're absolutely right. GPS is one form of RNAV. There used to be a form called LORAN, and that was super complicated and weird because it used radios that sent out ellipses. They weren't even round, they were egg-shaped, and calculations there. But VOR DME navigation is still performed by certain airlines and military organizations, specifically above 24,000 feet. Which is why grab card, the second D, is DME or GPS. Because above 24,000 feet, you're required to have one or the other, no options. You have to have DME DME or GPS above 24,000 feet. All right. So, yeah, again, it's like you make up a fake VOR and then they fly to and from the VOR just like a VOR. All right. GPS has 3 segments. And I'm only going to do part of this tonight. I've got time next week for it. I just skipped the breaks. So, GPS has 3 segments: space, control, and user. So space is all the stuff that's up in the space. Control are ground elements that support the space-based elements. And then user is you and your radio. one thing to bear in mind is that you are receive only. You don't do any broadcasting in the GPS world. All right, calculations are based on time and trilateration, which is literally they measure how far you are from multiple satellites, and then that calculates the interceptions of all those spheres, and where they all come together is where you are. The more satellites you can see, the more accurate this process is. It takes a minimum of 4. All right, the book says there are 32 operational satellites. According to the satellite website, the GPS satellite website, there's only 31 operational satellites right now. So, but you only 24 are required. A minimum of 4 are visible for 3D navigation. Typically, we actually use 5. You can only use 4 if you have barometrically adjusted altitude, which is what we have in our airplanes. But typically, you're getting 5. Extra satellites improve performance. More than 24 are usually running at any given time. It's augmented with ground-based systems. If you want to go check it all out, that's the website, www.gps.gov.
Are we allowed to use other, I don't want to use the word competing, but other similar satellite navigation systems like GLONASS or the Russian ones or Chinese Beidou?
Not in U.S. airspace. You have to use a GPS system to fly in the IFR system. That GPS system must be TSO approved. And as far as I know, none of them use anything but our GPS satellites.
We haven't approved China's satellites for.
What's that?
We haven't approved China's satellites for our go-to GPS navigation.
No. Okay, so, and then your GPS is coupled to your Omni CDI in most installations. Some aircraft don't have an Omni CDI anymore. They just have the CDI that's on the GPS. All right. Yeah, bottom line, at least 24 satellites flying in, and I believe it's 6 orbits. Don't quote me on that one. So, some people think they are geosynchronous satellites. They are not. They orbit twice a day. So you got new satellites coming in and satellites dropping off all the time. All right. So there are waypoints. Anybody here who has not used a GPS in a plane? Okay, good. So this you can go pretty quick on this. Airports, nav aids, GPS only. So what I was getting at here is there are waypoints in the database for every airport out there in theory. Sometimes you will jump in a plane to go to some obscure airport and it won't have that in the database. An example was Whiskey November 5-4, which is where I actually live, was not in the Jefferson database, even though we're a charted airport. And it has to do with it's private. And so I had to call and get them to add it to the database. It's now in the database. Super rough. Nav aids. So you have waypoints that line up with the nav aids. They're usually coded with the same letter codes as the ones that are on the chart. So, you know, the 3-letter code for dialing it up. All right. Then you have GPS-only waypoints. These are usually 5 characters. They typically are pronounceable as words, sort of. Sometimes you got to stretch that. There are, however, a whole bunch of them that are specifically built for visual references, and they all start with VP and then 3 letters. Those cannot be used for navigation under IFR.
Because you can't pronounce them.
You can't pronounce them, but they're specifically for visual flight support. And then user defined. You can define your own waypoint, but if you file with it, you'll have to actually put the lat long.
So you should probably use ForeFlight if you're going to be defining your own.
What's that?
You should probably be using ForeFlight if you're going to be defining your own.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, it's like
And
flying.
our aircraft have a couple that we've made. We have some named Johannes and Dallas fish flights.
Well, sometimes you got to go find places over and over again. It's just easier if you have a user-defined waypoint. For visual reasons, it's super handy.
Like the route to Glacier.
Yeah.
You can't just fly straight lines over there. It's like,
So these terms are super important to understand that desired track is the line you want to make across the ground. All right? Your bearing to a waypoint is the heading that would get you there in a no-wind situation. Your actual track is the track you are actually making across the ground. This is insane, isn't it? And then your cross-track error is the difference between your actual track and your desired track. Something that's important to understand is your CDI on GPS gives you a lateral distance error. It's your cross-track error. And that changes depending on how far you are from a departure airport or an arrival airport. If you're within 30 miles of a departure airport, you're in terminal mode, and your left and right deflections, I think, are 1 mile left and right. So
I kind of said the basics about it. It's like very confusing. But
was it confusing?
No, it wasn't. I got it at the end.
Okay, so yeah, desired track, bearing to the waypoint. So the bearing is the straight line to the waypoint you're trying to go to. Desired track, actual track. And then your cross-track error is this distance between here and here. All right, en route, non-WAS. So we'll talk about WAS later, probably next week. But WAS is Wide Area Augmentation System. In addition to all the satellites in the air, there's a bunch of specific points on the ground that are very precisely mapped. And they read those satellites constantly, and they do error correction. And then that's sent up to 2 other satellites that are not navigational satellites. And those 2 satellites correct all the errors. All with math. So, but in a non-WAS enabled GPS, your en route is 5 nautical miles to either side. In a WAS enabled GPS, it's only 2 nautical miles to either side. In terminal mode, so within 30 nautical miles, you've only got 1 nautical mile. So a 5-dot deflection is 1 mile. But it's a parallel line, it's not an angle, not like a pizza pie, it's a rectangle. And then when you get right up to the airport, it's 0.3 nautical miles. So just over 1/4 of a mile each direction. So your whole course is 0.6 nautical miles wide at the approach. And it typically is someplace just before the final approach fix is when your GPS switches into terminal mode. The reason this is important is you need to know that your needle may suddenly jump. If you have a half course deflection and you go from en route to terminal, you suddenly have a full course deflection. Okay? That's why you want to keep your needle centered. All right, we're going to stop here. It's 8 o'clock. Next week is all GPS. I was going to try to do this a little bit ahead. So if you have any questions right now, we're what we covered tonight.
You said you wanted these back?
I changed my mind. You can take them with you.
You wanted to make sure you did that.
Oh, I see. One of
I
those.
was pretty sure they would have done them anyway. But no, some people started taking more notes on them and things like that. So, but what I do, what I'm really trying to encourage you is take this time now to start figuring out what you want on your cheat sheet. And figuring out, like, okay, we're almost 1/3 of the way through. That's about 1/3 of the material. So use about 1/3 of your page to kind of figure out what you want to put down and what helps you remember all the things we have to remember.
I thought you were going to say use 1/3 of your brain to store it.
Just automatically regulate how much.
Yeah. Like that old Far Side. Excuse me, man. Excuse my brain is full.
So yeah. All right. So I got to direct to.
I'm gonna meet that guy. Live in Alaska. Stop.
Oh, Gary Larson moved to Alaska.
Okay, Larson. Yeah, thank you.
Of course you're going to Alaska. What do you expect?
Well, you can tell from some of his comics.